It's time for National Signing Day 2. We are the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff. That's Anwar. That's Jason Suchomel. As you guys pour into the chat room for a entire morning of recruiting conversation, I say welcome. I say thank you to Rogue Apothecary, the sponsor of today's National Signing Day 2 show. The good people at Rogue, we'll mention them throughout the show. Go to therogueshop.com for all of your needs, whether you need cartridges or gummies or meds. The ointment for the shoulders for like hurt and pain is pretty good as well. Everybody has a favorite aspect of that website and that product, and we love being partners with them. Fellas, we're here. It's National Signing Day 2. Jason, more than anything else, it really allows us, I think, to put a ribbon and bow on the 2022 recruiting class, unless there's an Xavier Worthy floating around out there in the world that we will only know about come April or so. Welcome, Anwar, Jason, as we get started here. Jason, I'll just come to you first. This is Devon Campbell all the way for you today. Is there anything else today's about?
Seeing what other schools pick up players. I put a thread on our board kind of, hey, this is our National Signing Day 2 headquarters. And, I'll just read the names. You got Champ Lewis, who technically is still a Texas commitment, the defensive back out of Louisiana. He just told me before we went live, Ketch, he's going to announce his decision at 10 a.m. So we're about 2 hours out from that. It's not going to be Texas, but, Champ's a guy, if you're a Texas fan, if you're an Orangebloods, we've been following him for a while, so we'll see what he does. But yeah, and from a Texas perspective, no news there. Wide receiver Caleb Douglas is a guy Texas made a run at late before they changed their wide receiver coach. Texas really is in the mix there, so he'll decide at 1. Most announcements are this afternoon. Harold Perkins at 3:30. Texas isn't a factor there, but I always said this with Harold, man. If Harold at 3 o'clock said, oh my gosh, I'm still torn, screw it, I'm going to throw these others to the side and go to Texas, it would be surprising, but it wouldn't be the biggest recruiting shock I've ever seen. TJ Dudley's a guy Texas offered. They brought him in for an early visit. He's deciding today at 3:30. Then we get to DJ Campbell at 4 o'clock, Texas and Oklahoma. That's the one we're all watching, right? That's the one story we'll have written and ready and analysis ready to go for DJ Campbell. I thought it was interesting. You made mention, Bill Piddick, should we just move the show to 4 p.m.? Ketch, you made mention yesterday that it was interesting that Sark's press conference is at 5 o'clock today. DJ Campbell's announcement is at 4. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Jacoby Matthews doesn't announce until 6 p.m. tonight. Again, Texas is, I said it a few weeks ago, I think running 5th probably in that race. So for all intents and purposes, we're watching Devon Campbell, and that's really about it. Could there be an Australian punter surprise? We've seen that happen before where, like, who's this Michael Buszewski guy that they just landed? I mean, could there be something like that off the radar? There's always a chance, but if there is, I haven't heard about it as of 8:05 this morning.
Anwar, we'll be busy all day today. I just want to put the ball on the tee for you and set you up. Today is what for you? How are you framing
Devon Campbell? There's nothing else. Like, I don't know. Like, Jason, I appreciate the rundown, but I don't know how many Texas fans are really excited to see about guys going elsewhere.
It was killing time on more fillers.
Like, ooh, I can't wait to see where else he goes besides us. It's like trying to see like who your ex starts dating next. And you're like, I can't wait to see who makes her happy. Like, not quite sure that is. So to me, it's just about Campbell. Waiting to see what he does at 4 o'clock. Kind of the things that we talked about. Seems anticlimactic just because we've been talking about it forever. And we've been talking about it, something that it just seems like it's a foregone conclusion. So if it doesn't happen, it goes to OU. We can all blame Jason, for that. But to me, there's nothing other than them stacking an already stacked offensive line room. Dude, where everyone else goes would be a side note for me. It's about Campbell and nothing else.
I think, however, we are doing a 3-hour National Signing Day show. I will say, I think there's a lot of conversation to be had upon reflection. For instance, I think that there's a really interesting conversation that we'll start having here in a second about the landscape in the state of Texas from where it is today in 2022 versus where it was 12 months ago. What this, there's a lot of like reflection upon what's happened this year in recruiting, both on, I think, the state of Texas level, on the national level, what NIL has meant. We're going to have Adam Gorney from Rivals.com join us at 8:30. So 23 minutes-ish or so. Adam will join us. We'll talk more national stuff with him at 9 o'clock Central. The Godfather, Mike Farrell, will join us. We'll talk portal talk. It's the other part of signing day now that, is kind of the elephant in the room. USC is going to have like a dozen guys as members of their signing day class today will be from the portal. Oklahoma's gone into the portal pretty big. LSU, Ole Miss. We're starting to watch the SEC a little bit more now that Texas is officially an SEC member, but not officially in the SEC. We have no idea when that's going to happen, but I think people are more interested about what will be happening in SEC recruiting than they are with necessarily how Baylor did. Because if you're a Texas fan, by the time those Baylor commitments are starting to make their mark in the Big 12, if you're Texas, you hope you're no longer in the Big 12. Jason, let's start with the state of Texas. I updated my Lone Star recruiting list one final time, in part because I knew it was going to be kind of a slow day. So I was like, you know what? I'll wait till signing day to do the final list because at least we have something to talk about. What I found most interesting is that at the end of the day, if Devon Campbell picks Texas as we expect, I think, and if Harold Perkins doesn't sign with Texas A&M, because, there's a split vibe between, it seems, whether or not it's LSU or Florida as we go to his announcement this afternoon. It feels like Texas A&M is kind of on the outside looking in. I think that's the big signing day shocker for me. I don't know that 12 months ago you'd have been able to convince me that he was going to be anything other than an Aggie. I don't know that you'd have been able to convince me that, even though he was still taking visits and doing all that stuff, I really thought Perkins would end up being an A&M guy on signing day. That he's not means that the final tally for top 10 commitments in the state of Texas this year, A&M and Texas are both going to finish with 4. Clemson's going to get Cade Klubnik, and one of Florida and LSU is going to get Harold Perkins. I would have to go back and look. I don't know that we've ever seen a split at the top between Texas and Texas A&M where everybody else is marginalized like that. I mean, historically, and I have to go back and look and see if that kind of breakdowns ever happened. And then when you expect that to the top 25, Texas and Texas A&M on my list of rankings, which aren't too dissimilar. My list of rankings actually favor Baylor more than the other rankings, but A&M and Texas was 7 apiece. So nearly 60% of the top 25 goes to Texas and Texas A&M. And then on my rankings, Baylor's got 2, Ohio State's got 2, Oklahoma's got 2, Bama, Clemson, Georgia, TCU, and 1 of either Florida and LSU, presumably with Perkins will have 1. Interesting that as we go into 2023, Texas and Texas A&M have asserted some authority. Both are going to finish with top 5 classes. A&M's class is historically good, but when you look at it from a breakdown in state, pretty even. And that's amazing for me, given that Texas is coming off of a 5-7 season.
Well, it's pretty even and pretty impressive. And to me, it kind of takes us back to the old days, Ketch, when you and I have been doing this a long time, before this influx of out-of-state programs just raiding the states. I mean, I like it. I mean, I'm not saying it. I'm saying just not because Texas is doing well, but I like the in-state battles. Keep the guys in state. Makes it a little more fun to cover, more exciting. Those wins and losses mean a little more to each program. You look at one difference I'll say with Texas, their top 10. You had Kelvin Banks, who was a flip. Some things kind of had to fall Texas's way. Terrence Brooks was a flip. NATO was a wild card. I mean, NATO Umeozula or however you say his last name. I know I probably butchered it again, but he was a wild card that Texas had to scramble to get. DJ Campbell, ironically, he's probably been the one for the longest time that we felt most confident about Texas landing. So Texas had some things go their way there, and not many of those were true head-to-head wins over A&M.
Yeah.
Whereas A&M, I'm looking at theirs, Denver Harris, huge head-to-head win over Texas, a guy that Texas led for at one point. Evan Stewart, a guy that was committed to Texas at one point. Texas never really went after Connor Weidman, but Cam Dewberry, big head-to-head win over Texas. I mean, Texas can absorb the Cam Dewberry loss because they've recruited offensive lines so well, but it does shape up. I mean, it sets up for a pretty interesting 2023 class. If I'm being completely honest, having talked to a lot of those guys, and it's really early. Both programs had junior days a couple weekends ago. I do think A&M still has a little bit more momentum. I think Texas is still playing a little bit of catch up there. For Texas to do what they've done this year, coming off of a 5-7 season, is remarkable. They can't go 5-7 again, or A&M there will be a clear separation among those two. That's assuming A&M has a decent season and doesn't collapse. But Texas has done a great job to kind of be nipping at A&M's heels, with A&M having, as you said, almost a historic class. I mean, Texas is top 5. That's pretty darn good. But I do think Texas now has to capitalize on the field this year. If they don't, I don't think they can expect that same success with the 2023 class.
Anwar, what's your vibe on what's happening in state as all of these schools position themselves to, be in pole position as we really get into 2023?
So it's interesting as I look through, as you guys are talking and look through the rivals, Texas top 100 list, and A&M catch. And again, you guys might clearly know this. A&M finishes with 8 guys in the top 20. Texas finishes with 3 guys in the top 20. To your point, Jason, of what you were talking about. And to catch, someone had asked where these, run, if you could run through your top 10 through your LSR. So, but to your point, it does seem, I mean, A&M did a hell of a job. Like, you cannot deny, what they were able to do just from a recruiting standpoint and nailing a lot of those top guys, the top guys that Texas ends up getting. We got, Terrence Brook, Kelvin Banks, and Brendan Thompson was on the right side on the outside there. So I feel like I may have missed one. Let's go back through Brooks. NATO, sorry. NATO was at 12. So 10, 11, and 12. This goes Brooks, Banks, and NATO. And then that's it. And then you've got Brendan Thompson right outside. At that point, Jalen is out there as well. So good, good job. But, I 100% agree with Jason. That's not the formula for success. Recruit, you might be able to say, okay, you got by with that one time, and that's fine. You were able to get by with that 5 and 7, but to think that you'd be able to do that again, I mean, nah, like don't get crazy with yourself. So there will definitely need to be some success that occurs on the field. It'll be interesting once we get past today. A lot of the elite guys catch for 2023 start, committing during the summertime. And so we will, okay.
Usually I've got other hats lying around. I was going to swap it out, but I don't have one today.
Well, I mean, you got it. Jason doesn't really have his sponsors, right? Because he's got an Adidas hat with an Under Armour.
Yeah, I'm just begging for one of them, Anwar. Come on.
Yeah, so, I mean, you maybe just open market, to the highest bidder, but
we're all open market to the highest bidder.
That's just Nike up on his chest there. So
yeah, that's true. So yeah, I mean, but it'll be interesting to see, the wait and see game. Will guys heading into this year, the 2023 guys, say a wait and see approach based off of 5 and 7 and wanting to see more, or will they just kind of just go all chips in and say, it doesn't matter? So. I agree with everything that you guys are saying as far as this year is concerned. Great haul by A&M. Good job by Texas by fighting probably the circumstances that they created for themselves, by the way. It wasn't like all of a sudden he inherited his team. This was the team that they coached. So you can't be like, man, that was great. Well, they dug themselves out of a hole. They just shouldn't ever do that again.
Anwar, real quick, I did my recruiting Q&A, and someone asked me in my Q&A on yesterday, how can Texas close that gap with A&M, or, I forget how they phrased it. Not to your point. I said, hey, don't go 5-7. Don't lose to teams like Kansas at home, and have a big marquee win over a team like Alabama coming to Austin next year. I mean, that's kind of what A&M did. Yeah, A&M went 8-4. Everybody said, well, it's not like they went 11-1. Well, they also had a big win, and they didn't have a loss on their ledger at home to a school like Kansas. They didn't go 5-7. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, Texas is going to recruit well. We've seen what they've done off of 5-7, but you can't keep doing that repeatedly. I mean, if Texas can go in 8 games, 9 games, 10 games, dare we all dream, or their fans dream, especially with a Quinn Ewers at quarterback, you can say, hey, look at the progress we've made, assuming it's Quinn Ewers. Look at the progress we've made with these young players. We're making progress. You can sell the progress, which will help recruiting. The good news for Texas fans, it's not hard to sell progress coming off of 5-7. You go 7-5 or 8-4, you can say, hey, we've made progress and we're going to keep building on that. And to the hat question, I will say, I forget who asked it. True story here. I literally bought this hat for these videos because all my other hats are New York Yankees or Pittsburgh Steelers hats. So I thought I was doing everybody a favor by going out and dropping $20 on just a generic blue hat. But now people want this one changed. So careful what you wish for, or next week it might be a New York Yankees hat. So,
yeah, wear your Steelers gear. Like, just rep it out. It's okay.
I might as well, right? I do have a couple of Rivals hats. God forbid I wear those, I guess.
I would wear it.
I think this is really one of the interesting things about this year's class, guys. And you, I think, unknowingly kind of pushed me towards this thought. It's so bizarre. Look, the biggest win for this staff is that in the summer, all of these guys, Banks, not so much Devon Campbell, I don't know that we heard a ton from him. Some of the guys that they lost, the constant message was, we want to see how they look this season. We like the pitch, but we've heard this before from Texas. That's kind of what Texas is known for, is talking a big game but never delivering. So let's wait and see. So everybody takes a wait and see approach, and then Texas goes 5-7. They have a 6-game losing streak that every single week had it in conversation with apparently the worst team ever, the 1957 Longhorns. Like, every week they did something, and it was not since 1957 has Texas done this, and it was always something really wretched and horrible. They did that and then found a way to finish in a way that, I would not have thought possible. Anwar, we've been doing these videos almost daily for a year now. You take us back to the summer and you start saying things like, Texas goes 5-7. How do we think they finish in recruiting? I'm not convinced they finish in the top 10, let alone the top 5. So all this brings me up to this point that we're talking about, which is, when we look at 2023, how will the recruits frame Texas inside their recruitment? If I hear from kids this year that they're going to take a wait and see approach, I wonder how much I'm going to believe that, based on the fact that the staff proved that even with an ugly, I'm not saying they go 5-7 again, they could do this again, but I'm saying I think we're going to hear a lot of guys say they want to wait and see with Texas. I think we'll continue to see some of that. And to this staff's credit, even though the kids were saying that, Texas found a way to work around that. When I wouldn't have thought it would be possible, Jason, I really wouldn't have. I would have thought, oh man, if they shit the bed, there's going to be a big fallout for that. And while they don't have the momentum that A&M has, they've weirdly found a way to get momentum to get us to this point.
Well, it's funny, I feel like Sark, to some degree, in this staff, are victims of what Tom Herman did and what Charlie Strong did, because you didn't hear or see recruits as much say, or certainly act out saying, I want to wait to see what Tom Herman's staff does. I want to see what Charlie Strong's staff does. There was so much excitement about those coaches coming in, maybe because Herman was coming off what he had done in Houston, was done a pretty impressive job. Charlie Strong, Louisville, they got the bump those first couple classes. I mean, kids were like, okay, yeah, even if they struggle, I get it because they're building this thing up. But look what they've done. Sark didn't really get that benefit of the doubt. He didn't get that first year bump. We sit here and say that, and Texas has a top 5 recruiting class. But even last year, it was a lot of guys saying, last year, this time last year, guys were saying, I want to see how Texas does on the field. Now, Texas stunk it up on the field and was able to overcome and closed late on a lot of guys. Tom Herman, Charlie Strong, they were able to get early commitments from guys to load up on pretty good classes where guys weren't having to wait to see what they did on the field. I almost feel like I said, I feel like Sark had to overcome what Herman and what Charlie Strong had done. They didn't get those early commitment waves, where guys were willing to jump on board, just kind of blind faith. Now, looking forward, Texas has one commitment for the 2023 class, Jamel Johnson, good player, really good player. They've got a lot of other guys who were at the junior day a couple of weeks ago, loved what they saw from the program. I don't know that any of them are that close to committing. Could Texas get a 2023 commit in the next month or so? Certainly, it's possible. I mean, the month of February is a dead period, but guys could certainly make a decision. But I don't get the impression we're going to see this wave of summertime commitments like we saw for Tom Herman the one year. I do think this year, maybe more than even last year, guys are going to take a wait and see approach with Texas A&M. You got changes at LSU. You got changes at Norman, Oklahoma. There's a lot of kind of unknown with the college football landscape around this region. So it's going to be pretty interesting to watch these 2023 recruiting battles. But we're here mostly to talk about 2022. I get it. You guys wanted to see how Texas did. Texas didn't do well. As you mentioned, Ketch, they set all kinds of records in futility. It's pretty incredible that the staff was able to overcome that. If we're being completely honest, some of it had to come, some of it had to fall together. You had coaching changes at Oregon. Obviously, you had LSU, which maybe impacted some things. Obviously, the situation up in Oklahoma. You had Quinn Ewers in the transfer portal. Things didn't work out there. Some things really came together.
Oregon.
Yeah, exactly. The Oregon was the big one. I don't think we're talking about Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams being part of this class if Cristobal hadn't left. Kelvin Banks, maybe. Kelvin was looking at Texas pretty strongly before Cristobal left. That put the nail in the coffin there. But, if we're being completely honest, I'm not discrediting the recruiting job that Texas did, but they did have some dominoes fall their way that really helped close the deal on some of these guys. You can't count on that luxury again in the 2023 class. So they need to play much better on the field to get some momentum there.
And the thing is, Jason, I just want to push back a little bit on what you said when you talked about what they had to overcome this year. Everything that I feel like they had to overcome was self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Everything was self-inflicted. Like there was nothing to overcome when, Tom Herman inherited, a bad program. He had to overcome that to a certain degree. I'm not quite sure what, Charlie really had to overcome. But, he inherited Sarkisian inherits a program that had 7 wins, that had, a bowl victory, that was not doing great in recruiting, but he's able to get the first year bump. But the obstacles they had to overcome was, him going with one quarterback and then pulling that said quarterback after 2 games. An obstacle was an embarrassing loss versus Arkansas. The obstacle was, to your point,
being able to close out games and
close that. We're talking about double-digit leads, heading into the fourth quarter and blowing those games. So I feel like a lot of the things that they had to overcome were self-inflicted more so than anything else. Like he inherited what we would view as a good, not great program, but a good program, and then struggled with it. And then so what we learned was, while they had struggles on the field, they ended up being pretty good recruiters. But we're in agreement that's not the formula for success. You can't maintain that. But you've got to be the one thing they've got to be able to do the next level is, okay, you can recruit, but now can you develop? Can you turn this into wins? There's that, when it's you lose to Kansas, that's not a talent issue. That's everything. That's an everything else kind of issue at that point, because it is what it is. So, that will be the next phase for me, Ketch and Jason, is all right. Now you got them. What are you going to do with them? Because you could only do the blame game for so long before this actually lands at your feet and it's really on you.
There's always a counter argument in recruiting. I think that's fascinating. People say, okay, you had big leads and you blew them. Why would someone want to go to Texas? Well, then you can tell the recruits, look, though, we're close, man. We had big leads on Oklahoma State, all these teams that we lost to. We were just a player or two away. We're close. Yeah, but you went 5-7. Yeah, but you know what? We need a guy like you to come in and help us, and you can start right away. There's two arguments that can always be made in recruiting. I think the staff did a good job of selling guys on, hey, man, you're the missing piece. These offensive linemen, hey, guys, that's what we're missing. We need you to come here. And they hit them hard with this on these official visits. They brought a lot of them in on the same weekend. They said, guys, you all can be possibly contributing as true freshmen, and you can kick that door down to get Texas back to relevance and national relevance. You guys can be the foundation of that. So, you never want to go 5-7, right? But you can also, as a recruiter, if you're a good recruiter, which Texas has, you can kind of spin that in your favor in a weird way. And they did that with the 5-7 record. They did that with, hey, man, we've been really competitive with some really, really good teams. We're just a player or two away. Come be a big piece of that puzzle, get us over the hump. And, that combined with just a lot of diligent recruiting work. I mean, Sark is a tenacious recruiter. He doesn't have that personality maybe that some head coaches have, but I mean, this guy recruits nonstop. I mean, damn near every recruit I talk to talks about their position coach, and Steve Sarkisian is the guys that are recruiting them for Texas. So, they did a good job with that. Again, they had some pieces that kind of fell their way. You put it all together, and Texas is looking at a top 5 class. Now, Anwar, like you said, let's see them take the next step with development, with wins and losses ultimately on the field.
Jason, I'm going to kick you out of here. We've got Adam Gorney from Rivals.com ready to join us and hop in and talk some Texas recruiting from a national perspective and National Signing Day and beyond. We'll see you in about an hour. So
yeah, sounds good.
Go, sniff out something.
I'll work on it. I meant to make something up, but I'll work on it.
You go make something up. Anwar and I were tempted to do that yesterday with Devon Campbell. Was just
great.
Make something up.
You better let me on the joke if you ever do that, so I'm not chasing my tail around for 4 hours or something.
Well, we did it in a video, so it wasn't like we were really doing it, but yeah, It was like we need to spice this thing up. Jason Suchomel, Orangebloods.com. Again, he'll join us in about an hour. We want to drop Jason out, and whenever Michael Rockman, our producer, is ready to go, we'll bring Adam Gorney, and there he is. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Gorney, all one word. He is the national recruiting director for Rivals and Yahoo Sports. Adam, just jump into the conversation. We've just been talking about, from a big picture standpoint, Texas pulling off what it did in light of the season that it had. It's kind of unexpected for us because we had heard so much wait and see from the top prospects. When you look at what Texas has done and putting itself into a position to finish among the nationally elite this year in recruiting, from your perspective, what did they do? Like, how did we get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, from following that season, what they did in recruiting was incredibly impressive, because you look at the teams ahead of them in the national team rankings. Alabama obviously played for a national championship, won the SEC. Texas A&M on the kind of knocking on the door of the college football playoff and has an incredible class. Georgia won the national championship, and then Ohio State won the Rose Bowl. And then Texas, a 5-7 team who kind of struggled, who lost to Kansas, who blew some leads, who really things were not going well this season for them, frustrating, did not look competitive in some games against some really good teams. And so I think, what they did in recruiting was really impressive. It's a credit, I think, to start and talked about Sark. And like you guys said, he is a head coach who's not kind of the CEO closer type. He's involved very much I saw him at games in Southern California this year. He's out on the road being very active in recruiting. I think that helps. He's developed relationships from previous stops that he's definitely leveraged to get kids to go to Texas, if not only visit, but to commit and sign. You look at some of the West Coast kids, his time at Alabama certainly will help develop that relationship. And then the longer he's in the state, the more relationships he'll develop and recruiting will go even better. But like you said, the next step is important. He's got to not lose to Kansas. He has to beat Baylor. He has to not blow leads. Those kinds of things will turn kids off at some point. But Texas still has a lot of cachet. Sark is going to be a very active recruiter, and he has a lot of people around him that are going to recruit really well too.
Yeah, Adam, that was kind of leading into, one of the things I, wanted to ask was, it seemed like that them going 5-7 and doing what they did is somewhat of an anomaly. That's not sustainable, right? That's not the formula for success going forward. Like you're not going to expect, Texas to finish 6-6 or 7-6 and still finish in the top 5 in 2023, are you?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. I would also not expect Texas to finish 5-7 with the talent that they have in this class and that they bring in through the portal, which we can talk about. So I think that's going to be an important thing moving forward. I will tell you this, kids still think very highly of Texas. Texas kids think that. I think you can see that from the recruiting class in the state. This is also a team that hasn't won more than 10 games once in a decade. So that, this isn't necessarily a national powerhouse program that people need to go to visit, but they are recruiting like that this year for sure. They've recruited like that in years past. I think this year, Sark goes 5-7. That turns around with the talent that they're absolutely bringing in.
Adam Gorney joining us from Rivals.com here on the Orangebloods Live National Signing Day 2.0 show. National Signing Day 2, the most exciting of all National Signing Days. Adam, we're waiting to see what Devon Campbell does. To say that Rivals is a fan of him would be an understatement. He finishes the year as the #1 ranked offensive lineman in the country for Rivals, despite the fact I'm projecting as an inside guy and doesn't bring, on paper, the obvious tackle upside and value that I think you would normally expect. To tell everybody in your mind who Campbell is. He's a guy that has been talked about for 2 years now, but that he's finished at such a high level and it performs so well against nationally elite players, and just for 2 straight years always delivered. It seems like every time he was in a platform to kind of prove it. I love this dude as a player.
Yeah, what I saw from him at the Under Armour game against national competition is, and to put this delicately early in the morning, he's the meanest, toughest SOB out there. I mean, he wants to fight people. He wants to battle. He wants to go in. And if the quarterback ever gets on his back, never let it happen again. He's going to, play through the whistle. He's going to battle inside. There's, a lot of times at these all-star events, guys take 2 reps, do well, and then sit out the rest of the week. That was not him. He wanted to go every single rep. He just has an attitude about him that we love. I love offensive linemen, that have a little bit of hate in their heart, and he's got it. And I think that really stands out about him. In a year, and we can talk about this too, in a year where there was not an offensive tackle who really stood out and said, this must be the #1 offensive tackle in the country. This must be the #1 offensive lineman. We decided to go with Campbell because he does have position versatility. He has had it in his high school career. He just wants to beat people into the dirt. I think that's why Texas recruited him so hard, and I'm almost certain that they're going to get him today.
Wow. Damn. You guys good. By the way, good information on Campbell. I want to jump into a topic, and Catch, feel free to jump back into if you want to go more offensive line or Neto or some of the other guys.
Well, I'm definitely asking him about Kelvin Banks.
Okay. All right. So we'll go back to that. So how do you, I'm just kind of curious as you're evaluating Texas from a recruiting perspective, what do you think of what they did through the transfer portal? They're able to get Quinn Ewers. They're able to get Ryan Watts. Jaleel Billingsley. It almost seems like Rivals, we need to have some transfer portal rankings because that seems to be the next phase and wave. But within, as you start talking about what Texas did from a recruiting perspective, your thoughts on those additions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And believe me, from our perspective, we are desperately waiting for those transfer rankings to come. We want to, my goal as the national recruiting director is to have a complete reflection of a recruiting class. So there are teams across the country that withhold spots for transfer portal guys. We don't want those teams to be penalized just because they're not recruiting as many high school guys, because they know they have people on staff whose entire job is to refresh the transfer portal. We know that they're bringing guys in. We know that they're not recruiting quarterbacks because they're bringing a guy in, or, they've made it clear that they're bringing 2 in and only 1 high school guy. All the things that we're juggling now with the transfer portal, we will want to have reflect in our rankings. But yes, Texas did a phenomenal job. Getting Quinn Ewers changes the scope of what they can be next year. Allowing Sark to have Quinn Ewers run that offense is going to be impressive. Bringing in Alabama's tight end is going to be impressive. I think as you go through this, and honestly, Texas is one of the teams that really hasn't leveraged it as much as some others. Some teams have changed the entire scope of what their team is going to look like next year from the transfer portal. Oklahoma lost 2 5-star quarterbacks in the stretch of a few weeks into the portal. And that's the way kind of college football is going to look. It's going to look, at least for the time being, until people get their hands around it. There are more people in the portal than spots available for them, so it might calm down a little bit. But if I'm a struggling coach, or if I'm a coach that after year 1 or 2 things are not going well, I'm not going to go out and get a high school quarterback that I need to kind of groom for 1 or 2 more years. I might not be there. I'm going to go out and get portal guys. And I'm not saying by any means that's Sark's situation right now, but when a Quinn Ewers situation presents itself, you absolutely go after him. And juggling that in recruiting and relationships and the management of the things has made things a lot more complicated, but from our end, honestly, a lot more fun to watch.
Adam Gorney of Rivals.com joining us here on the Orangebloods Signing Day show. Adam, I wanted to go back to Kelvin Banks simply because, what happened with him at the Under Armour game, and, he had been, if I'm not mistaken, he was ranked 10th in the country and might have been the number 1 offensive lineman. I can't really remember what the rankings before the most recent rankings look like. We all, even at Orangebloods, we were there. We agreed that it was not his best week in practice. We thought he played well in the game, but during the week, even though making the move from left tackle to right tackle, a lot of Texas fans have felt like he shouldn't have been punished for playing a position that he didn't know really well. Can you walk us through when you guys got together as a recruiting rankings unit to talk about rankings, to talk about players? I know the last thing in the world you guys ever want to do is give a guy a 5th star and then take it away. It's one of the reasons why you guys are so cautious in giving out 5 stars early on in the first place. You don't ever want to have to do that. So can you walk us through what those conversations sounded like when that ends up happening to Kelvin Banks? And, he took a pretty large plummet from the most previous rankings before the end of 2022, and then with the final update.
Yeah, and that is a good point. And that is something that I don't know if we're right on or wrong on. It seems like giving a kid a 5-star is a whole lot easier than taking it away. Once he's in that 5-star world, and we've been in this for a long time, it's just kind of hard to move them back down. It's almost being like, penalizing him to an nth degree there, which is unfair. I'll speak openly about what we saw from Kelvin Banks during the week of practice. I thought he struggled immensely with speed, with power. I didn't know what was going on because when we saw him at the Rivals camp in Dallas, the guy was a complete ass kicker. He wanted every rep and he dominated every single rep. And Cam Dewberry was there and Will Campbell was there, guys that finished ranked ahead of him. And he looked better than them, and he played better than them, and everything kind of came together. And like I said before, this is a class where we're really not sold on who's the number one offensive tackle. Probably 1 through 6, even Banks included, could make an argument right now for number one. None of them have really dominated to that level that we're like, man, this is definitely the guy. So as we sit down, we're like, is there a 5-star offensive tackle in this class? And the way our rankings work is college performance and then projected NFL draft position. So I basically said, look, we're going to have guys drafted in the first round of the NFL draft at offensive tackle. It's an inevitability, and we're probably not going to get them right, but let's take a shot on who we think could possibly end up there. And after the week that we saw at Under Armour, we could not, in good faith, put Kelvin Banks in that position. And so what we said is, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a guy who's super versatile, who moved inside and did incredibly well at the All-American Bowl, and Elijah Pritchett put him 1. Zach Rice stays a 5-star because he did nothing at Under Armour to drop. And then Josh Connerly, who is crazy athletic, we're going to make a 5-star and take a shot and put him in a projection. So it does look like Kelvin Banks plummeted, but really, I mean, he's still around 65 in the country. That projects him into about the second round of the NFL draft. We don't think he's a bum. We think he's a very, very talented and good player. We just needed to kind of move him down. I mean, I do give the kid credit. Some kids didn't show up to the games. Some kids showed up and didn't do much. And so how do you reflect that in a ranking compared to a kid who came, who worked hard, who was there all week and took his lumps? We didn't want to plummet the kid, but I think after his performance there that week, he did have to move down a little bit.
So one of the things I'll ask though, how much did the factoring of the switching positions kind of play a part in that, going from left to right, being, from what we understand, one of the few, if not the only guys who volunteered to do that. So it's interesting because you talked about Campbell, right? And how much of a competitor that he was and willing to do all these things. It sounds like Banks also had some of that competitiveness within him to say, okay, I'll raise my hand. I'll switch. I'll move over there. Did you guys think, all right, well, this was a brand new position for him. Maybe we're judging him a little bit too harshly.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely part of the conversation. There were some on that call that wanted to actually drop him lower. And I didn't want 1 week of bad performance to be reflective of 3 years of great performances. And so, he was not the only one at those all-star games who moved positions. Elijah Pritchett, they loaded up his team at the All-American Bowl with tackles. So he moved inside and actually played guard, which is an entirely different position. So some of that feeling is, yes, we should not kill the kid because he moved from left tackle to right tackle. But also on the flip side of that is, if he can't handle the speed off the edge at right tackle, what do we think? Why do we think he can at left tackle? So, it was one of those issues that it was just we saw everybody ahead of him, and we thought they played better on a national level than he did that week. 6th in the country is nothing to sniff at. So I mean, 6th in the country at his position is nothing to sniff at. I think we just needed to make an adjustment after seeing everybody over a 2-week period.
Adam Gorney joining us here on our National Signing Day 2 show. Adam, last question, I'll let you go. And by the way, thank you for giving us some time today. I realize this is probably one of about 100 media commitments you have. So I'll let you move on and get ready for what comes next, in addition to all of the millions of things that might happen today as we wait for a number of guys to make their decisions. The quarterback situation, real quickly. Cade Klubnik doesn't have anything to do with Texas, but Anwar and I love the kid. And it was probably about 14 months ago when he and we just had a huge crush on the kid. I made big waves not too long afterwards where I moved Klubnik ahead of Quinn Ewers. And again, we're talking about really fine margins. If I tell you one's 2 and the other's 3 in the state, you more than anybody realizes, okay, so you think one guy's 15th in the country and the other guy's 17th. It's a really close thing. In a world where Ewers is classified in the 2022 class instead of reclassified when he goes to Ohio State, how would that battle have looked? What do you think about, obviously Quinn Ewers is at Texas now. I'm just curious about those two guys. I mean, Ewers finishes number 3 overall in Rivals rankings. Even if you think Ewers stays at number 1, we'd be talking about the potentially number 1 and number 4 players. Just talk about them contrasting and how that might have looked if they'd stayed together and maybe played each other again in a playoff game, which would have been quite the event had a round 2 occurred between those two guys.
Yeah, I would have loved to have that debate over the last year. It would have been incredibly interesting, and here's why. Because when you see Quinn Ewers throw a football, it's very rare. I mean, it pops, it flies. Everything he does is really impressive on a football field. When I saw him at the Elite 11 in the summer right before he reclassified, I was like, man, this looks, how Trevor Lawrence throws a football. This is legit elite football throwing. I mean, it's really impressive. It looked different coming off his arm, coming off his hand than anybody else at that event. The problem is that Cade Klubnik is such a gamer, such an incredible leader of his team, a winner, all of those things, and is still incredibly talented on a football field. So do you take the guy who looks different and kind of has a little Mahomesy in him where he can kind of sidearm it, where he's comfortable throwing on the run against the grain in Ewers? Or do you take a kid like Klubnik who every time he's on a football field, he wins and everybody loves him, and maybe he's not the most physically impressive kid, but he's the biggest gamer in this entire class. So in my heart, I think Ewers probably would have had the edge just from like a projection standpoint over the next 5-10 years. But I don't think that means Klubnik would have dropped much out of the top 5 at all. I think we would have had 2 Texas quarterbacks in that top 5, probably 1 and 3, maybe 2 and 4, something in that range. And who knows if we would have gotten it right or whatever. But both are incredible talents, and I think both have very, very bright futures at Texas and Clemson ahead of them.
Yeah, it'll be fun watching both of those guys do their thing at the next level. Adam Gorney, Rivals.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at Adam Gorney. Read his stuff over at Rivals.com. It's there all the time. His most recent article, if I'm not mistaken, and Adam, you can correct me, he's got predictions on all of the unsigned Rivals 250 guys on where we think they'll go today. So if you want to see what he says about Banks, Harold Perkins, any of the guys making decisions today that we'll be watching, it's right there. Just go to the front page of Rivals.com. Adam, thank you. Be well. Go enjoy the rest of your day.
See you guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Again, thanks to Adam Gorney from Rivals.com joining us here on the Orangebloods Signing Day 2 show. Thanks to all of you. I'm looking at the number. It just keeps creeping up and creeping up and creeping up as we go throughout the morning. It'll be interesting to see if we peak with some of the numbers that we had on signing day 1 when it was so eventful, and we don't have quite as many events, but I'm optimistic. Maybe we'll hit 1,000 live in the room. I should say to everybody, if you're watching on YouTube right now, subscribe to the channel. Hit that. It's literally just right there. Just click the subscribe button, the one that's on the middle of your screen, and we would appreciate that. We'll be going live today all the way at least until 11 a.m. We said that last National Signing Day 2 Anwar, and we just kept going because there really was a lot of stuff going on. So we'll play it by ear. If we're ready to get off at 11, we will. But we're going to be here with you for most of the morning. And Devon Campbell makes his announcement today at 4. Just a little programming update. Steve Sarkisian will have a press conference at 5. And although Anwar and I really haven't talked about it, what we did last time was we came back and did another live broadcast for about 30 minutes to an hour later this evening. If nothing else, one of us will do it. I'll do it. Maybe Suchomel will probably join us. We'll see how it goes. But the plan would be we'll do some post Sarkisian post-Campbell announcement broadcasting as well. Anwar, we're about...
Hold on, I'm going to follow up on the Adam Gorney thing.
No, that's what I was about to ask you. I was going to say we're 10 minutes away from Mike Farrell joining us. So just wanted to let everybody know, if you really want to get angry and be mad, at the top of the 9 o'clock Central Hour, Mike Farrell will join us to focus specifically on the portal stuff. He's the Rivals portal guy now, and we'll talk a lot of Quinn Ewers and everything else. Anwar, for the next 8-10 minutes or so, let's reflect back on what we talked about with Gorney, because I thought there was a lot of interesting discussion-worthy things. Where do you want to go first on what we just talked about?
Well, first of all, I thought he had some really interesting stuff as far as like the transfer portal stuff is concerned. I gotta start with from the end, and I didn't love. And first of all, I enjoy Adam Gorney. I actually got a lot out of what he said today. I didn't love his Kelvin Banks explanation, to be quite honest with you. And I don't know if there'll probably be an explanation that anybody from Rivals that provides that I think will be something that anyone who follows the Longhorns loves. But I still, it's almost like penalizing the guy for 1 week of practice. It just doesn't seem to add up. It doesn't seem fair, where this is where your evaluation that led you to all the things that you said that made this guy into a 5-star was just suddenly negated. It's like, whoa, we were wrong. I mean, we were, I don't, how can you be that wrong? Like, how
they
can you
thought he was that bad.
That bad? Well, then their evaluation initially had to be that bad to put him as a 5-star. I mean,
well, and Anwar, if we'd had 20 more minutes, I probably would have spent 10 of them on Banks and really flushing. It was a really interesting piece of the discussion to kind of see how the sausage is made. And one of the things that he said was there were guys on their recruiting when they're having their rankings conference calls, Zoom calls, whatever, however they do them now in 2022. There were guys that wanted him to go down further. And I wanted to follow that up with, give us an idea of, if there's a Russian judge out there, if we're dropping highest and lowest, because there's a Russian judge in the figure skating competition that won't give the American the good score. What was the opinion of just like, what was the low mark of where someone wanted Banks to fall? Because you're right, to go from 10th to 65 nationally means they almost have him outside of the window of elite prospects. That means he almost went from 6.1 to 5.9. He finishes as a high 4-star ranking. It sounds like there were guys that wanted to drop him to at least a mid 4-star ranking. I don't agree with them, but I understand slightly where they're coming from. When Alex Dunlap watched his reps, even he was like, holy hell, that was not good. I think the question that I would like to have kept talking with them about is they looked at him playing right tackle and not being super experienced there and thought, well, how can we possibly project him to be better on the left side than the right side? Because everybody knows at all levels of football that the left side is traditionally the more difficult side, but it is the side that he'd been playing throughout his high school career when everybody loved him.
And gave him a 5-star.
There's a rub when you watch him play left star and you think he's a 5-star, and he moves over to the right star side and plays at a level that has you questioning what you thought you saw when you actually watched him on the left side. It is, it's a fascinating conversation. I will agree. Look, those reps that he was involved in, there were some of them that were just bad. His balance and his footwork were awful. And if I'd never seen him before, I would have thought something completely different about him. It was, okay, well, the thing that I kept thinking when I revised my rankings was I have a pretty large sample size of Kelvin Banks to go off of. And, oh, by the way, I never really thought he was a left tackle anyway. So I'm not tripping about that. Like, I think personally, I've always thought Kelvin Banks as an interior guy more than a tackle anyway. I've always said one of the things about Banks, Campbell, Nato, Dewberry, they're all more natural inside guys than tackles. That a year ago with Brockermeyer and a number of other guys that were in that star-studded offensive line class, that they were more tackles than guards. It was just kind of inverse this year. But the Banks thing, I feel like that's a 3-hour show right there, because philosophically, I think there's some things that you could question about that. I would have loved to have asked a little bit more about just how low. Was there anybody left that thought it was a 5-star? Anybody at Rivals on that conference call that fought for him to stay in that kind of territory? Because he did tell us that there were people who thought he should have gone lower than what he finished, which would have been the complete outlier to how everybody else in the country would have ranked Kelvin Banks.
Well, the thing is that if this is the case, if you're a young athlete who's a 5-star or you have a high ranking, what's your motivation for going to this thing anymore? Like, protect your ranking at that point. Just say, hey, I'm nursing an injury. I don't want to do it. You can view it as like.
Well, some guys do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I would tell you this, I can't blame him going forward, because it sounds like, you can either solidify it, but it sounds like it's almost like if you are at the combine and you already have projected to be, a first-round pick, there's guys that are like, no need to run, no need to participate. I'll come here for the interviews and do nothing else, because if I'm going to get penalized, especially when I volunteer to do something, someone said, switching positions on the offensive line is like wiping your ass with one hand and then having to switch to the other. Like, it takes a little bit of second to get used to that. So,
but you know what? If you're a 5-star butt wiper, you can do it with either hand. And I will say this: if you're a 5-star, truly a 5-star, you know who makes that adjustment look easy? A 5-star.
Yeah, but he's a 5-star. He's a 5-star going against other elite guys trying out something new. So it's not like he's a 5-star who had any practice, working his way up to it. It just, he gets thrown into it, and it's like, oh yeah, you're a 5-star and you're a great player. Now just go ahead and do this against someone else at a different position who's at their position. Now,
well, I'm personally not punishing him in his ranking for that. Like, I've kept him almost in the exact same territory that I had before, but you'll never be able to convince me that the best offensive lineman in the country can't play right tackle because he moved. Moving sides. Like, if you're a 5-star,
against the best, you should be so freaky.
If you're a 5-star, you should be so freaky that nothing like that stops you. Oh, well, I can't play right tackle because
against the best.
Because you're supposed to be the best.
He's going against the best.
He wasn't just going against 5-stars.
I mean,
it wasn't like he went against the best guy in the country on every rep. He was going against guys that ended up finishing ranked lower than him, and he did struggle. And I'm just saying, I don't agree with the drop so far down, but I understand where they would be coming from to get in full pads, an apple for apple evaluation against good players. Look, we can go back to Kelvin Banks later. We'll get back to Devon Campbell. There's a lot of stuff to get into over the course of a 3-hour show. I don't want to make Mike Farrell wait. Apparently I had a hard time saying that in a sentence. Much longer. Mike Farrell from Rivals.com. The Godfather joined us here on the Orangebloods National Signing Day 2 show, brought to you by Rogue Apothecary. Go to the rogueshop.com. Mike, welcome. Happy National Signing Day.
It is happy.
I don't have to do a lot. What are you doing today?
I don't know. It's my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Mike.
Thanks. It falls on this day, maybe 6 out of the last 25 years or so. So, just getting all the text messages from all the coaches that love me across the country saying happy birthday.
Yeah. It's a sweet
How many
lot,
Longhorn
Mike.
fans have told you happy birthday?
Oh, I get a ton of those texts too. I'm sure there's a thread on the board.
Mike, let's talk about, I'm curious. We had Adam Gorney on 30 minutes ago, and one of the things we talked about was the need that rivals will need to make in terms of adjusting rankings and doing something with the portal and finding a way to have a conversation about when we talk about the best recruiting classes in the country, being able to include a Quinn Ewers into the conversation when he transfers from an Ohio State to Texas, because if he was just a recruit, that value would be so significant. As you watch year 2 of the portal, really year 2 of the portal, where are you on the bigger landscape of where this is going? How much room schools are going to start saving every year for this exact thing? Like, give us just at the top a very generic but table setting view of what the portal means in this bigger conversation in year 2.
Yeah, we discussed this a couple years ago before the portal even became what it is now. The incorporation of transfers into rankings, getting rankings on transfers, and I won't go into the details. I mean, you've worked with me for as long as I've been around, and some of the struggles we have in getting stuff done, but it's going to happen. I mean, it has to. This is a huge part of recruiting. It depends on the school as to who's going to hold back scholarships and how many. The Dabo Swinney's of the world are late to the game and don't like the portal. Some teams look at the portal crop and they don't jump in as much one year to the next. I mean, last year it seemed every kid was going to Michigan State. This year they're not quite as busy, and it's LSU and Ole Miss. So I think what it allows you to do is rebuild faster, but it also ramps up expectations quicker when you see transfer, especially quarterbacks, going from one program to another and leading them to the national title game like Justin Fields did, or putting up crazy numbers like Mayfield and Murray and Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma. Expectations are there. So when a Caleb Williams chooses USC like he chose yesterday, well, guess what? Lincoln Riley, you're supposed to win the Pac-12 now. Not in a couple of years, not through recruiting, but now, because you've got the quarterback and you also got a few other players through the portal that are very, very good players. So I'm surprised at Texas, just because when the season ended, things ended so poorly with the vote of confidence and all that stuff. I was told that the roster was going to be blown up, and I even messaged you and said, we could be talking about potentially a 40 to 50 player change on the roster. And here we are sitting February 2nd, and they got 4 transfers in. So somebody hit the brakes on something, and I think everybody had a come to Jesus meeting and moment. And it's not as crazy for Texas as I thought it would be, but they will hold back probably 8 to 10 scholarships a year now. We're seeing a bunch of kids that are getting walk-on offers today that would be scholarship players in past years.
It's interesting. Mike Adam, we were talking to him before you came on. How do you guys, from a ranking perspective, when teams are holding back scholarships for certain guys in the portal, how do you make sure it is a concern of like ranking teams fairly when okay, they're putting 8 aside, so they may not have someone thinking in the 2022, signing day class from high school, but they'll have guys in the portal. How do you guys kind of balance that and adjust what's seemingly going to be a new world? Does that mean new rankings? Does that mean, portal rankings? Like, what do you do with this, knowing that we're kind of changing in front of our eyes?
Yeah, it's going to mean new portal rankings. It's going to, there's a plan that has been in my head for at least 2 years. Hasn't been done yet, but it's there. And the plan is to rank your high school players individually, rank your transfer players individually, Have your high school champion, named on the first Wednesday of February, because, high school recruiting is still going to be 75 to 80% of your roster, maybe 70 to 75%. Then, the transfer cycle is different. It's August 1st to August 1st. So right now you can have your transfer portal rankings. You could put Texas wherever, they only got 4 portal commitments compared to other schools. That's not as many, but they do have arguably the number 2 portal recruit in Quinn Ewers behind Caleb Williams. You can rank them as we move along now. And then you got the May and June purge of players and more transfer portal activity, and then have a team ranking in August of your portal top teams, morph it back with your 2022 class, and come up with a preseason look at who did the best. And I think that's how it has to happen eventually. And that's not the exact time frame, but yeah. And it's listen, it's hard. I mean, how do you rank Jaleel Billingsley, who's been in Alabama for a few years, who has the body of work of high school, which was so long ago in my eyes, and the body of work in college? And how do you rank him compared to some tight end coming out of high school? Like, where's the balance? But it has to be done, because these 4 guys are part of this recruiting class for Texas, period. And Quinn Ewers, as I mentioned, is a 5-star transfer portal commit, and he's not counting. He's counting last year on Ohio State's team, but not in Texas this year. So it has to change.
Mike, one of the questions I've been getting a lot in the last week or two, since the portal has started to slow down, as the January, December, I guess I don't know how you personally frame them. Maybe it's pre-January transfers, because guys have been hopping in the portal throughout the football season since August 1st. What do you think the next few months looks like in terms of when we get post-spring and the next big round of portal guys jump into the fray? How strong would you anticipate that? Like, from your perspective, how do you view what remains in the portal chase? Because there will be schools that want to sign. If Texas wants to find an inside linebacker, and it might be that doesn't get filled until May or June. What do we think the next flood looks like? Is it anywhere close to the high level of talent that we've seen in the last couple of months?
I think it will be, and I think, you have your season-ending reactions from players. I'm homesick. I'm not playing enough. Coach doesn't like me. My coach left. Whatever the reason is, they want a new home. NIL is another one. But I think you're going to have the same thing in the spring. You're going to see a lot less defined depth charts. I'll tell you that much. The post-spring depth chart is dead. It's over. You're never going to see it again.
Suicide.
You can't. I mean, because if you do it, forget it. You might as well just go up to the kids who are 3rd string and say, "Here's the portal. Get in." You got to keep things open. You got to keep. Last year there was Ohio State's a good example. We don't know if CJ Stroud's going to be the starter. Yeah, you do. You knew. You just couldn't say it out loud because you had, Kyle McCord and some other guys that would have jumped in the portal in May. So you kept them around. And that's how it's going to have to be. But there will be a lot of talent that jump in. We'll see 2022 kids jump in. We saw it last year with 2021. They go, they don't like it, and they jump. So I think there's going to be a huge, huge round again of talent. And as you know, the frustration with covering the portal is high. It's really, really hard because there's so many things attached to this. Like, high school kids all want the attention, right? They all love recruiting. They all love to be told how great they are. They all love their ranking. They love this, that, the other. When you get to the portal, it's like JUCO on steroids. There's an element of shame, first of all, that you're leaving, whether it's on your own terms or someone else's terms. You just like, there's an element of maturity, which doesn't exist. It's in their heads that they're more mature 2 years later than they were in high school. There's an element of, I don't want to go through this all again. is a nightmare. And then there's an element of speed. These things happen. They don't happen over a 2-year period where you're covering a recruit. These happen in a week. So it's nuts, and it's going to be crazy in May. So buckle up. That Rivals portal feed that we have is arguably the most amazing thing on social media. It is up to date by the second, and it's a great way to follow things because things happen so fast. I mean, Ewers, the second he jumped in, we knew where he was going, but he had to visit some schools, but it was a week, right? Week and a half.
Yeah,
We're
approximately.
used to covering these kids for 4 years. It's nuts, and it's kind of crazy to be thrown into it at this advanced age, but it's exciting. It's exciting because it's brand new, and it's like, okay, we don't know what to do with this. We're going to give it to you. Figure it out, and I'm still figuring it out, and it's kind of fun.
Mike, it's interesting. We've grown up throughout the years, especially college football, kind of with the 3-year window of what you can fairly judge a coach after 3 seasons, right? But with the rise of the transfer portal, do our expectations have to change? For instance, Lincoln Riley goes in, and what's his total at right now at USC? Is he at 12 portal guys at this point? I know it's in double digits. But do we go in and say, well, he needs 3 years to develop a program, or do you go, all right, he's got Caleb Williams and a bunch of all-stars. How does that change? How does he look for USC or Florida State, or you even say, Texas? Do we Ketch and I preach like, okay, you got to be patient. Because, look, you're Texas, you're coming off a 5-win season, get to 7, maybe get to 8. But then if you add a 5-star in the portal, are we still on a 3-4 year plan? I'm just kind of curious your perspective on what the expectation should be, since free agency it's so immediate. You can immediately upgrade your team.
Yeah, and I think he's at 13. It changes constantly. Caleb obviously has been committed to USC for a while. The deadline was last week to enroll in spring classes. There's a drama element to it. So I don't think there's any stragglers out there. I think that's where they stand right now. And then May will change things again. But when I first started doing this, the standard was 5 years. This was late 90s. Standard was 5 years. You get 5 years. And then it changed to 4 when expectations rose and some coaches had some early success. And 4 was always the magic number because, I can't go into a living room without promising a kid 4 years because that's his entire lifespan of his college career, barring a red shirt and all this other stuff. But I need 4 years. Recently, it switched to 3, probably about 5 years ago. And now we're seeing 2. I think we're gonna see 2. I think you're gonna have 2.
That's crazy.
That is crazy, and that almost stops me in my tracks to think about what that means, because it means that if a new coach comes in, and maybe these are rich man problems, right? We're talking about Power 5 programs. Maybe it does extend below an SEC or a Big 12 or a Pac-12 or anything like that, but when you said 4, it used to be, well, a guy's got to be able to let his first group of recruits get to be seniors, right? Because something's wrong with the roster. So you got to be able to let his guys turn into seniors. And now, because of the portal, it's hard. The lines just get blurred ever so slightly to, I think Anwar makes a good point. We're now looking at the Sarkisian era through he's got Quinn Ewers for 2 more years. So he better do something by the end of year 3 with his 2 years of Quinn Ewers, because then that cycle ends. And I've never talked about a Texas head football coach where his first cycle is 3 years instead of 4.
And I'll tell you this, he goes 4-8 next year, he'll be fired.
After 2.
I believe so. And the reason I say this is because name, image, likeness is so important now. The portal is so active. The dead man walking coach really, really kills recruiting, but it's going to destroy you in NIL and the portal as well. No one's going to go to a school where the coach has 1 year left to prove himself. No one elite. I mean, I think the guy we have the biggest example of right now is Scott Frost, right? If you want to say there's a coach in college football who's a dead man walking, it's him. You know, he didn't have a winning season again last year, but they lost a bunch of games by 1 point. We'll give him another year. Well, that's not going to help recruiting. You're already up against it in name, image, likeness because you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, which isn't bad. The small town NFL school versus the big city college is not a huge difference. You know, everybody said LA. You know, and when Caleb Williams was rumored to looking at Wisconsin, I'm like, he could make a ton of money in Wisconsin. You know, they're pretty feverish about their football there. Not as much as LA, but he could make his money. But I don't think kids are going to jump to a coach if he's on the hot seat. And the hot seat is going to be, it's going to change from warm to spontaneous combustion. And I don't know if we're going to have a hot seat anymore. I think you're just going to see things blown up. And, you know, you're seeing this also at the NFL level. You know, Brian Flores getting fired after 3 years at Miami. That shouldn't have happened. You know, there was talk of getting rid of Matt Rule, who could be the new Michigan coach after 2 years. And it's all guaranteed money. They're all guaranteed millions and millions of dollars, but they'll find millions of dollars elsewhere. So they'll pay the buyouts, but they will not let a coach that's sort of a dead man walking stay. So if they go 4-8 next season, I'm telling you, a vote of confidence in your first year from the athletic director, what the hell is that? That's the first time I've ever heard that. And it happened last year.
Anwar, you got anything? I've got a follow-up question. If you
go ahead, go with it.
Well, I wanted to somewhat just the biggest red meat I can throw to you on this feed. And, you know, we're creeping up on 700 people watching on various platforms right now. So thank you for tuning into our live 3-hour National Signing Day 2 show, talking to Mike Farrell of Rivals.com. Quinn Ewers. We haven't had the Quinn Ewers discussion yet, but you're the portal guy. He's the Texas portal guy more than anybody else. I almost want to put a ball on the tee and have you say exactly what you said back in December, just because your thoughts on Quinn are that he's going to be a special talent that is in the NFL sooner than later. The only caveat that I wanted to throw on there is I believe when we had you on in December, you thought Ewers would be the first pick of the 2024 NFL draft. I think I got that year right. He's in the same classification as Caleb Williams, and they both go into the portal, and it sounds like in an imaginary portal's rankings, Caleb would be 1 and Quinn would be 2. So tell me your thoughts on Quinn Ewers again from a talent standpoint, and then the juxtaposition against Caleb and where we think, because those two guys are going to be a conversation piece. I think they'll be potentially connected over the next couple of seasons going into that draft. I'm just curious how you think about them as NFL talents.
Yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. You know, obviously they're different quarterbacks. Caleb Williams is smaller. You know, he reminded me of Tyrod Taylor coming out of high school, and everybody will say, wow, that's what a crappy comparison. You know, Tyrod Taylor is, I believe, still in the NFL. He wasn't the number 1 pick overall, and back then height mattered. But he had cannon arm, very effective at Virginia Tech. Now, you know, the comparison would be Kyler Murray or somebody like that who went number 1 overall. But a very effective quarterback. But now with the new NFL, you know, Caleb Williams could be the number 1 pick in the draft. I mean, Baker Mayfield, small. Kyler Murray, super small. Didn't matter. Now, the fact that those guys haven't had success, is that going to hit the pause button on the shorter, more mobile quarterbacks? Not that Mayfield was that mobile. It might. And then you got Ewers, who's Matt Stafford to me. Very similar as far as, you know, arm talent. I'm not talking like looks or build. I mean, Matt Stafford in a mullet would be awesome, but never happened. But I'm talking arm talent, just a cannon of an arm, able to make those. The biggest pet peeve I have in scouting, because I do obviously high school, portal, college, NFL scouting, off platform garbage, right? Pat Mahomes off platform. Okay. Quinn Ewers can do that. Zach Wilson did it last year. Wowed everybody, went number 2. He doesn't need to, but he can. So he's shown he can do that. But when you're talking about a guy who's big, who has an arm that could fit it anywhere, you watched Stafford last week, 12, 13 years into his career? His arm is perfection, and that's what Quinn Ewers has. So I think Ewers would be the one that NFL scouts would be more geared towards grabbing, number 1 overall. It depends on if he has that Joe Burrow coolness about him under pressure, and he needs to show that at Texas, because all we've seen right now is a few handoffs. But I will say this. I wrote a Fact or Fiction about a month and a half ago. I think he's worth 3 wins, and I think he has to be. He's tied to Sark. If Quinn Ewers fails, Sark's gone. The only way Sark stays is if Quinn Ewers is successful, and he has to be successful early. I think they can win 8 games next year with him. I think they've got some talent around him. Obviously, Bijan, Xavier Worthy, Isaiah Nair is a really, really good transfer they got. I think they can win 8 games next season with Quinn Ewers, and I think still have him projected with that arm talent, rare to be that top pick in 2024.
Last thing I'll ask, and I thought it was a really good one. There's a guy, William Torres, asked something in the comments. Did the transfer portal kill junior college recruiting? What have you seen, Mike, as far as JUCO recruiting is concerned?
Yeah, it's really down. So this is the other thing that fascinated me about this. When I first started covering, JUCO recruiting was pretty big, especially in the SEC, but also, in other conferences, and teams like Kansas State used to rely on it heavily. And if you wanted a guy immediately who could help you, you go to the JUCO ranks. Now, there's a problem with them if they're at the JUCO ranks, grades issues, off-field issues, whatever. So it's risky. JUCO stayed, then prep came and sort of outdid JUCO. You had a Hargrave and Fork Union. I remember going to games in those places in Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, watching 5-star and 4-star kids who didn't have the academics. Prep's gone. Where is it? We do a prep top 5 now. I used to do a 50. In JUCO, we used to do 100. I don't even know what we do now. Maybe a 50. You could do a 25. So it's really taken away from those guys, because even with the portal, like you might have a kid like Julio Billingsley who had some off-field issues with Nick Saban and was in the doghouse, and there's an effort issue there, a question of effort and all that stuff. But there aren't those academic questions as a JUCO player. So I'd rather take a kid who's been coached by Nick Saban, who has college experience, over a kid who may have some academic issues or off-field behavioral issues, who hasn't been coached by Nick Saban from a JUCO. And that's where people are looking. It hasn't killed JUCO, but prep died, and it died fast. And so I want to know, is all these kids who went to prep who couldn't make the grades, they're all going to college now. How'd they make the grades now? It's magic.
Well, and what's interesting, I'll follow that up and I'll let you go, Mike, because I know you probably got other things you got to be doing today other than just hanging out with us. I was talking to a guy that has some experience in Texas's academic side of things, and he mentioned that it gets really hard for older guys to transfer in if they're not grad transfers, because they have to get, like, Texas will only take 60 hours towards graduation. So if you're a 4th-year senior and you're trying to graduate to Texas, the transfer part gets to be really tricky if they haven't already graduated. It kind of is, the transfer portal will become, I think, a bit of a young man's game, because if graduation matters to you at all, transferring late can be really tricky. It can mean you have to go to school for 2 or maybe 2 more years just to graduate. Whereas if you can get to it, it's why it's weird. Like a guy like Hudson Card, we don't know how long he's going to stick around at Texas, but it feels like he's going to get his degree first and then take care of everything else afterwards. Just how difficult have you noticed that? Last question, just for older guys where they want to go to a school, but the academics end up being something that gets in the way.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of this last year was Darian Kendrick from Clemson. To some, depending on the school, he was his credits were transferable, all of them, and he was essentially a grad transfer. Now, he hadn't graduated, but he had enough where he could be considered in their academic world as a grad transfer. Other places, half of what he took was transferable. And I can tell you, he wasn't taking, neuroscience. So it depends on the school and their academics, and it depends on how you bring it to your academic advisors and your people. You can't bring 15 straight transfers who are 30 credits away from graduation and get that past the athletic director, your academic people, and even your president. It's just not going to happen because your grad rate will die. So it's tricky, and it's a lot of math. It's a lot of interesting math behind the scenes as to, can we take this kid? But you're also seeing more kids graduate in 3 years. Joe Burrow, the big talk is, Ohio State fans are trying to claim him because he graduated from Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
He graduated from Ohio State, and then he played 2 years at LSU. It's like, okay, how did he graduate so quick at Ohio State? And he was a grad transfer, so he didn't have to sit out before the portal. But you're seeing a lot more 3-and-out grads and grad transfers. So I do see the younger man's game, but if a kid's talented, I don't care how his credits translate. A school's going to get him in, period. And it's just like high school. I saw kids with 480 SATs get into college. 480. That's an X where your name is.
They weren't even guessing answers right on the SAT. That's tough to do. You just write C on every answer and get to a 600. Mike Farrell, Rivals.com. It's not just National Signing Day. It's also National Portal Day, although you could make a case that we need to do a show on August 1st where we wrap up everything that happens nationwide on the portal, because Mike just told us he thinks it's going to get real interesting in the spring, post-spring ball. And if the talent's anywhere near the level that it was in the last 30 to 45 days, we need to hold off on our college football predictions, because what may happen in September, October, November throughout the season may really be connected to just what the hell happens in the final few months of portal season, which is still a little ways away. Mike, as always, my man, really appreciate the time. Enjoy your birthday.
Yes.
I hope you get some cake and some socks or something for a present, and we appreciate you giving us some time.
Being old sucks. Socks. Yeah, that's what you Socks. Thank you.
Nice. Some people are sock people. That was Mike Farrell, Rivals.com. Anwar, we'll do exactly what we did with Adam Gorney, and then we'll, maybe jump in to take some questions and go into some more broad conversations. What from our conversation with Mike stood out to you?
I think the thing that's really fascinating was the thought process that coaches have gone from 5 years to 2 years, and really what the transfer portal is going to raise the expectations. I mean, look, Catch, in our comments, we have people saying that Texas is going to beat Saban in week 2. Like there have been people already saying that. And that's transfer portal related, right? I mean, that's the thought process of, you've got Quinn, you've got Billingsley, you got Watts, you've added in some pieces, you've added in some components there that should make you, maybe you get O'Shawn, Mathis at some point. And it really the thought Catch of which is, I can tell it's going to be a race between you and I as to who writes this in the offseason first. But the thought process of thinking like, man, you've got 2 years. You've had 2 years of the transfer portal. You didn't make us better. You're out. Not 3 years to develop. You've had 2 years of transfer portal. You didn't go out and get anybody. Like, that's the thought process that I thought, wow, I hadn't thought of. But, man, you talk about a different world. That's a different world.
We're about to bring Jason Suchomel back on to continue the conversation. I would simply say, and there's Jason joining us. Jason, welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
The last hour went by really quickly because of our conversations with Adam Gorney and just now Mike Farrell. I think, honestly, we could spend the next 2 hours just talking about those two conversations. You missed the doozy on Kelvin Banks, and I'm sure that it will be something that comes back up by the end of it, Anwar and I spent 10 more minutes talking about what it was that Gorney said and all of that. I think the most
in regards to his rankings, Catch, I got to know.
Yes, he took us behind the. He went Wizard of Oz on us, and he pulled the curtain back. And
which I'd stayed on to watch that. Yeah,
and it only made the conversation, I think, more confusing for some. I don't know how well people thought he answered the questions, and it really made for some interesting conversation. Which ultimately, before Farrell came back on, was Anwar saying, if you're a 5-star lineman, don't ever play in an all-star game because you might risk your ranking. And I was thinking, yeah,
but NATO raised his ranking like 100 spots or something silly, 70 or 80. So
it can happen.
But if you're a 5-star, you have nothing to you. It's only a loss. At that point.
You're probably only going to go down if you're.
And Anwar, I wouldn't do it if I was a 5-star for the injury stuff alone. Like,
that's a once in a lifetime experience, man. I totally disagree. I mean,
no. I don't know. I'd love to get Kelvin Banks on today and ask him, what did you think about playing right tackle and getting punished for it? Let's go back to what Farrell was talking about, though, Anwar. And Jason, feel free to hop in this. This is because I think this is the real interesting thing. Mike Farrell is not wrong. And I know we've said this before, but we just outlined it in a conversation that felt very real. So, Jason, we were talking about when Mike Farrell came into the industry, and you and I, and Anwar for that matter, 5 years is what guys would typically get, coaches. And then it became 4, and more recently it became 3. And he was saying that because of the rise of the portal, you're going to start seeing coaches get fired after 2. And he brought up the NFL, and it made me think I'm a Cowboys fan, and we want to fire Mike McCarthy after 2 years too. But Sarkisian does have 3. Like, I don't know if it's fair, but he's connected to Quinn Ewers, and what happens in the next couple of seasons with Quinn Ewers, I think absolutely decides the fate of Steve Sarkisian in a way where maybe it stays the same, but I'm not sure it does if they don't sign Quinn Ewers. Because Anwar, I think the narrative at that point is you got to let Malik Murphy grow up, and you got to let Hudson Card figure it out, and maybe it takes time to get there. And like you mentioned, Anwar, we literally have people in our comments right now who are saying Quinn Ewers is going to barbecue Alabama in week 2. The expectations for what should take place, we're watching in real time change before our very eyes. And by the way, shout out to Rogue Apothecary Hat. Can't say that enough. They are the sponsor of our Orangebloods National Signing Day 2 show. As you can see, go to the rogueshop.com, use the promo code Orangebloods, and you will get hooked up on your CBD, your Delta 8s, gummies, cartridges, whatever it is that you might want. Special thanks to Rogue Apothecary. Anwar, 3 years for Steve Sarkisian, primarily because of how well he's done in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how the expectations have changed. Where like you said, it's real time. It's real time, which means after year 2, we're looking at it and saying, all right, like, who can get it? Because again, it's not so much now catch about developing, just what is it saying? Stop it, guys. Oh, okay. Well, go place your bets now. I mean, like, if you feel that strongly about it, to get off the comments for a second, leave this open, go place your bets. You got plenty of time to take out a second mortgage on the house. And, if you're that convicted, go ahead and take some of that equity that you built up, especially living in the Austin area. Put it all down.
Anwar's challenging people today.
I'm just saying. I mean, don't talk to me. You believe it. Go ahead and do it. But it's interesting because, ultimately, it's because it's starting to mirror the NFL it's all free agency at this point. That you really become like, all right, if you're in the NFL, right, and I did it for years, the free agency is basically for the teams that whiffed on the draft. Like the teams that just whiffed in the draft and missed the left tackle, missed the defensive end, you have to go into free agency to basically make up for your mistake. And that becomes really what you can do in college recruiting now with the transfer portal. Okay, you don't have guys. Maybe you feel like the other guy the program you inherited didn't have stuff. We're going to go and quote unquote make up for the mistake, right? And now there's no excuse for it. So, Jason, what we were talking about, like, for instance, like a USC, none of us, Jason, think, oh, well, you're going to give that guy a bunch of time to put it together. Now, when he's got 12 guys and, we consider a lot of them to be elite, you're like, okay, you expect instant results. Then now you look at, other programs, you look at like a Texas, and say, man, well, you guys are hitting pretty hard in transfer portal. Why are we waiting 4 years for something to happen when you've got guys on campus right now? That's the really interesting kind of topic of conversation.
All sounds good, but I'll say it again. I don't think you can have, maybe Michigan State's a bit of an outlier here, but I don't think you can dramatically flip a program in 1 year without a quarterback being part of that equation. Texas, that certainly fits the bill at Texas. That fits the bill at USC as well now with Caleb Williams going to USC. So
Baylor would disagree with you.
Yeah. Well,
because they don't win the Big 12.
But they did change. They did have a new quarterback. You got to have great players.
He wasn't elite,
huh?
Well, he didn't come from the portal either.
No, he didn't come from the portal. But I mean, they did improve their quarterback play. I think the portal, you can take a pretty good team to a good team. I think the way to go from a pretty good team to a great team overnight, and you still got to recruit pretty well, but I think you have to hit it at the quarterback position. Is that what Texas is going to do with Quinn Ewers? None of us know yet. We'll see. But I mean, this could be this is why next year is going to be so interesting to me. It could be 5-7. It could be 10-2, 11-1. I mean, as silly as that sounds, none of us know, man. I mean, what are they getting from Quinn Ewers, from Ryan Watts, Isaiah Nayor, who I'm on record. I think he's going to be a huge addition. You can certainly fill, I think this time last year I was saying, the portal's no way. It's not quick fix. Well, I'm changing my tune. You can fill some pretty big spots and improve your team quickly. I think to get to that next level of championship quality football, be it conference championship like Baylor, Baylor did it mostly with the offensive line, but certainly if you're going to compete at a national level, you got to have great quarterback play, man. And you can get that in the portal, and that's what Texas is hoping for from Quinn Ewers.
But Jason, that I think also lies into the portal, which is if you need great quarterback play, then you get judged on if you went out and found a great quarterback. Right. I mean, and if you don't, because you can say it through recruiting, but I think the portal has eliminated the excuse of we don't have talent on campus. There's enough talent that's available. You've got to, part of your recruiting duties now has to be going and getting the guys in the portal and judging your ability to recruit portal guys and not just high school guys, to find the instant upgrade. Because to Ketch's point, if you see Baylor go out in the portal and find a way to instantly upgrade, you can't be sitting here like said, well, we're watering the flowers over here. We're hoping for this thing to grow when someone else has got some miracle grow. Like at some point you're like, no, we want that miracle grow also. It looks weird. I don't know how it works, but you guys make it work. So that's the other thing is like, if you don't have it, the excuse can't be, well, we don't have it. The portal's saying you better go get it.
Well, the guys you get from the portal, and Dave Aranda did a tremendous job of coaching his team up, but the guys you get from the portal aren't going to be the guys that are going to compete with the Alabamas of the world, the Clemsons, the Ohio States. I will go to my grave saying you have to recruit high school players at an elite level, the way those programs do. And then if you want to pluck a couple players out of the portal, the way Alabama does, Georgia, obviously, those guys are losing more players to the portal than you're gaining. The portal has pretty good players. Very rarely do you find a truly elite player in the portal. Those guys are few and far between. Maybe Quinn Ewers is one for Texas. I still listen. The portal's great. You can build your program up in a hurry. You can take it from bad to pretty good in a hurry from the portal. I still think to compete at the highest of levels, you have to recruit the elite of the elite high school talent, and you have to develop them, obviously, and do things with them. But you have to do it Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, up until last year. You have to do what those programs are done, and then you can cherry pick in the portal the way we've seen those programs do.
Before we reset and I think get back to Devon Campbell, we can take some questions from people in the chat. We haven't really had a chance to do a whole lot of that. We've been going now, creeping up on an hour and 40 minutes, and it's been kind of go Onwar. It feels like it's kind of flown by.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I would say about the portal before we reset the conversation, kind of go in a different direction, is I did not expect Mike Farrell to say he thought the talent level after the spring in the portal would be anywhere near what it's been in January, when we've seen, potential two guys that could potentially be the first pick of the 2024 NFL draft, and Quinn Ewers and Caleb Williams enter the portal. We've seen Oklahoma. We've seen all of the coaching changes, and some schools kind of rock to the core. I found it interesting to hear him say that, simply because if you're a school that doesn't have a lot of scholarship room left over, you might end up, more so than you'll want to in real time in April and May, say, God, I wish we had a couple of more scholarship spots because of what has entered the portal. It will be interesting in these next few months to see how much of what we think happens in the college football season can potentially change because of activity that takes place in the spring. I mean, Texas had Xavier Worthy last year really late, so late that we didn't even hype up Xavier Worthy as
totally unique situation.
I totally agree, but one thing Farrell's right about, you're going to have guys across the country who are early enrollee guys from 2022. You will see more guys than normal. Like I think it's just going to become more mainstream that guys will enter the portal after being in college for 4 months because they don't like their position, because of NIL, because of homesickness. Like, we're going to see, I think, a lot more activity in the portal in the spring than maybe we can guess. But there's no way to know like what that looks like, who it includes. One thing Farrell said is, you're an idiot if you put out a depth chart as a coaching staff in the spring moving forward, because that's basically an invitation to anybody who's not where they want to be. Like, oh, okay, well, I'm not starting. And we see it with the Moody kid, the linebacker at Alabama, who went back into the portal because he wants to see where he is coming out of the spring, which schools in the spring still have room, who sets aside 5 scholarship spots, right? A bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush. If you know you can take 33, but you're like, look, we're only taking 28 right now because, and I'm not talking about Texas, obviously, and we want to save 5, because that takes some real patience. It takes some real patience to say, we don't even know what's going to be in the portal, but we're saving room because we have to.
I'm curious. I'm interested in what Mike said, because to me, your better prospects are going to be in there in January. Anybody who enters the portal in April, well, they're probably entering because they've gone through spring football and they're not in a position they want to be in. They're probably down the depth chart. Those are the guys that I think will mostly be entering in April. I think the guys in December are probably your better bets. Real quick, someone asked me about Nick said, Jason, any updates on early enrollees, Brendan Thompson, Malik Murphy injury status? Brendan should be fine. He's going to run track this spring for his high school. Malik Murphy did have surgery on his foot right after his season ended. He's going to be very limited for spring football. I mean, you might see him out there doing some minor stuff, but I don't think he's going to be a full go participant. Now, the good news is, when I was checked on it a couple weeks ago, he's on a good path to recovery, but it's going to take, I was told, about 4 months for him to recover. Real quick, Catch, I want to throw this at you, and then we can go to wherever you want it. The portal. If you took the best players from the portal over the last couple months and put them all on one roster, let's say they all went to whatever, Baylor. I want to just put a down team, Rice. If all those players went to Rice, is Rice suddenly a contender, like a national
Absolutely.
champion? You think they are? You think there's?
I mean,
that
just
much
from an offensive skill position standpoint alone, you're back. One of your starting quarterbacks is either Caleb Williams or Quinn Ewers, right? I mean, if you're saying they all go to one school, your quarterback depth chart's amazing. Take the running back from Georgia that was at Georgia Tech, ironically enough, who goes to Alabama. You slot him in to running back position. The wide receiver position has been loaded. I mean,
I still don't know if you're competing with the Georgias and Ohio States and Alabama's. It'd be an interesting study to.
If you're taking the best player per position, you're talking. I think if we go back, I broke it down. I took the top 50 players that the athletic.com, shout out to Max Olson and the guys doing great work over at the Athletic. If you took their national top 50 from this past season, which was not as deep. Like, this is what we've seen this January period is more significant than what we saw a year ago. I believe there were 8 All-Americans that transferred from the top 50. If I remember correctly, there were about 15 first team all-conference major players. Like, I think I'll send you a link to the article that I did, Jason.
I read it, yeah.
If you go back and take a look at just the depth, like this time last year, nobody was saying Jamison Williams is going from Ohio State to Alabama, first team All-American, right in ink. That kind of went under the radar. There were a lot of guys that were ranked 11 through 25 that you were like, oh, wow. I mean, think about the kid that goes from Oklahoma to Miami, the wide receiver.
Rambo.
Mm-hmm. Charleston Rambo ends up having the greatest season in the individual wide receiver season in the history of Miami football. That wasn't expected necessarily when it happened. So the actual production from guys in the portal was way more significant than I would have guessed. Doesn't mean that this year's will be exactly the same. We're just learning in real time. Really, like, I don't know that there's a right. They're just opinions because.
No, it's an interesting case study for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, but we won't have the answers until 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years of any real track record of what it really means.
Well, one thing we know, Anwar Ketch will be all over it with a bunch of numbers and.
Oh, I'll have it as soon as I have it. I will share it.
Which transfer guys go to the NFL? But it's interesting though, Jason, as I look through it, and I sent Ketch this list. I sent it to you on Slack, Ketch. When there's a 24/7 that is doing the ranking of portal guys, right? So Jason, so your top 2 quarterbacks are Caleb Williams, or Quinn Ewers as far as your top 2. Your third guy is Jackson Dart, right? So you figured that would be an immediate upgrade. Eli Ricks goes from LSU to Alabama, so that would probably give you whoever they got him as an upgrade. Jamar Gibbs goes from Tech to Alabama, really good running back. But then you also have Zach Evans in there, who goes from TCU to Ole Miss. You got Mario Williams, who follows Kingsbury. My guys, that's a slip of Riley. Out there, Drew Sanders ends up being in the top 10. That's a guy that Texas wants. So I get what you're saying, but you can go down this list. There are some guys who have an impact player, and you probably could fill out a pretty good team. I think the only thing that's tough, I think, Jason, when you say things about competing against like Georgia and Alabama, like that's like the gold standard, I think, of what your results would be, like to be able to compete against Georgia, Alabama. People can't do that on a good day, let alone a portal day. But when you're trying to compete, within your conference and trying to better your team, I definitely think, the portal can definitely help in those ways. But I mean, keep competing against the GOAT versus Georgia. I mean, that's asking a lot for any program, like I said, on a good day.
We keep bringing up Baylor. Baylor did it, and they didn't bring in the biggest of marquee names from the portal. I mean, they found, what they did, Anwar, and we've all talked. They had a good eye for talent. Maybe they developed those guys somewhat in 1 year, but they really had a good eye for the guys they brought in.
Yeah, and coaching matters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find those rankings that I did in our archives, and it's proved trickier than I thought. Let's take some questions. Let's reset a little bit. Again, this is the Orangebloods National Signing Day 2 show here on YouTube, Facebook, all the various platforms. We're still going about 700 strong. Glad to have you guys with us on this National Signing Day. The big news. We'll start at the top. Jason, think of it as like the very top of the show. Set the table for what you specifically and everybody else as a byproduct should be watching over the course of today. Obviously, Devon Campbell announcing at 4:00. There's not a lot of other stuff Texas related inside of that, but table set for us.
Yeah, DJ Campbell will announce at his school at 4. I mean, that's the big thing. We've got Champ Lewis, a Texas, again, technically still a Texas commitment. He's supposed to announce, as I look here, in 8 minutes. It's not going to be Texas, and that's more Texas is doing than Champ Lewis. I don't want to spoil Champ's news, but I think Texas will be playing against him next year for at least 1 year next year. So look for him to commit somewhere that's on Texas's schedule. There are a couple other guys. Harold Perkins is going to be a guy of interest. It's not going to be Texas, as I said this morning, unless Harold, he announces at 3:30, unless Harold at 3:25 says, screw it. None of these other ones feel right. I'm going to Texas. Almost like, we've seen that before, like a Corey Redding type deal, right, Ketch? Where you've told that story before, where you're sitting there and he tells his mom right before he announces, hey, by the way, I'm going to Texas. And she's like, what? So it'd have to be one of those types of deal with Harold Perkins. DJ Campbell's at 4. Jacoby Matthews, the 5-star safety out of Louisiana, is not till 7. Again, not going to be Texas. Highly, highly unlikely it's going to be Texas. After I left the first time and came back for this segment, and I need to finish it up, I'm kind of writing an update on Texas's offensive line recruiting. I'm writing with Campbell, I'm writing it without Campbell. But if they do get Devon Campbell, that'll be, without question, the greatest offensive line class Texas has signed in the 20-year history of Rivals.com. He'll be the highest ranked offensive line recruit they've ever signed. He's one spot higher than Justin Blaylock. If you can get Justin Blaylock-like production from Devon Campbell, if you're a Texas fan, you should do a backflip over that. Texas in the 20-year history has never signed more than 2 Rivals 100 members. That would give Texas 3, not to mention a couple Rivals 250 guys. So, I mean, this has a chance to be a historic offensive line class for Texas. And I'm writing this story and I'm like, it's amazing to me. Kyle Flood was brought in when he was hired. He was brought in with one goal: fix this shit show of an offensive line that Texas has had for more than a decade. It's just been a constant struggle. They recruited 2 linemen last year. The line class from 2020 was a 4-man class. Only one of them's one player remains in the program, Isaiah Hookfin, who's done nothing. You go back through it all, it's just been disaster after disaster of offensive line class, and Texas is having to put the pieces together. You got a guy like Jake Majors and Junior Angelau, guys like that who have hit that were fairly highly regarded, but not many at all. In Flood's, he was charged with, hey, get this thing on track and do it in a hurry. And not only if they get, it's a great class with or without DJ Campbell, but if they get DJ Campbell, I wrote, not only has he done it, taking the recruiting to another level, he's done it with a rocket ship, man. With a rocket strapped to his back, his first year in Austin. I mean, this is a guy, Kyle Flood hasn't even been in Austin a little more than a year. He came in January of last year. So what he's done in his first cycle is nothing short of remarkable to me. And I'll say it again. I said it earlier. Some pieces had to fall in place. The coaching shakeup at Oregon helped, but credit Kyle Flood, even after those guys committed to Oregon, Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams, he still kept hammering away on those guys. So when opportunity presented itself, those dudes were quick to flip to Texas. So just an amazing job. I said this with Cole last night. I said, we're not expecting a lot of fireworks for Texas today. It's probably going to be one addition, but that one firework is a freaking ball of TNT. I mean, you are landing the best offensive lineman potentially that Texas has ever recruited in the 20-year history of Rivals.com. So not big in numbers, but boy, if Campbell picks Texas at 4, that one addition deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah, Jason, go ahead, Anwar.
Yeah, Jason, out of curiosity, this is probably something that's just common knowledge that you may have touched on, last year. Why did Campbell decide to wait until the second signing day as opposed to the one in December?
He's never given any true inclination, Elmore. It's kind of always been like, hey, I'm going to sign or I'm going to commit at the Under Armour game in January, right? But he's always been, but things can change. I might do it earlier, I might do it later. So he's never given any true explanation of why, other than, at the Under Armour game, he just said, hey, I've waited this long, I might as well go ahead and wait till February, which is interesting because he wasn't doing any more homework. He wasn't doing any more visits. He wasn't doing any more in-home visits. So, I think it's probably just to have his moment in the spotlight, if I'm being completely honest. But his plan has always been to take things pretty slowly and not commit until January at the earliest. But he'd always hedge that and say, hey, but things can change if I just feel differently. So.
Got it.
Let's take some questions from people in the chat section. If you want to get your questions in, now is the time to do it. I think we've kind of already answered this, but a number of people have asked it throughout the day. Besides Campbell, who else do we have a chance with? Real chance. That's about it, right? I mean, just to reset, if we're talking what's expected and what's real.
Anything else would be a surprise. Real chance, we're talking DJ Campbell, and that's it. There's a linebacker, TJ Dudley, who visited Texas in the summer. He's expected to pick Clemson today. I don't think Texas is really even pushing that hard there. So, again, we'll have our eye. We're going to watch these other announcements, but I think it's really DJ Campbell or bust. Barring a complete surprise and something unforeseen, it's DJ Campbell or bust.
Someone asks, sorry, I've got it covered up here, but today, the last day for portal kids to sign until June, do they have a sign-by date? Not really. I mean, the big thing is if you wanted to get in to the early spring and, you wanted to be an early enrollee, a guy like Caleb Williams, you had to be in class this week. So they're at the latest, he waited longer than most. Most of the guys were having decisions in place so that they could be in place. Guys now, O'Shawn Mathis is a perfect example. He can commit, but I don't know that there will really be any I don't know there will be big announcements. He might just enroll or do something official, but there's not really a signing date for portal guys. So,
and technically, these high school guys we're talking to, they have until April 1st to sign. Yeah. I mean, everybody signs today, but you've got Josh Connerly, who's an offensive lineman out of, I think he's Washington State. Yeah. Texas did offer him, and Texas is not in the race. I don't want to go too deep into that, but he's not signing today. I mean, you'll see guys like Zach Evans, the running back Anwar mentioned earlier. They don't have to sign today if they're just that torn. I keep throwing that out there as, could Harold Perkins just be like, you know what, I'm just not ready? Could he take a little bit more time? I'm not expecting that, but
Harold, a guy like that never has to sign a letter of intent. Harold Perkins could just say, I'm not signing. I'll show up to whatever school I'm going to show up to in the summer, and he could maintain his leverage forever. It isn't the type of leverage that most high school kids could get away with.
I've never seen
a five-star guy doesn't ever have to sign if he doesn't want to.
I've never seen anybody do that.
It's happened a couple of times. It doesn't happen very often. I can't remember it ever happening.
I've seen it happen with. I don't know if that. I mean, maybe you're right, but I know that can happen with early enrollees. You don't have to sign in December. You can report in January. I think these guys have to sign.
They don't.
Do they not?
They don't.
That,
I mean, a kid can go play. A kid can never sign a national letter of intent and then maintain the flexibility to take his decision making all the way up until when he wants to enroll. In theory, it doesn't happen very often. If my kid was a 5-star prospect, I don't know that I probably wouldn't have him sign a national letter of intent. In the event that there's a coaching change, in the event that
what if you're a 5-star who signed with Michigan, and Jim Harbaugh possibly leaves? Then you're
exactly. If I'm a 5-star guy going to Michigan, hey, I'm coming to Michigan, but if anything changes, I don't
You
want
better
to
be there when I get there. Yeah.
I don't want I only get one get out of jail card in the portal. If I'm a 5-star guy, I'd say I'll save my wild card until I absolutely need it. Someone's asking, this is an interesting question, and this guy's been in the chat all day long, so I want to give him some love. Assuming DJ Campbell signs, for all of us, I'm curious, who is UT starting 5 in 2022? Anwar and I kind of had this conversation a little bit in the last couple of days, so I'll let you go first, Jason.
Whew. You're talking about first game starting 5 or
just first game? I don't know that we can project Oklahoma.
Yeah, see, I'm not going with any of the freshmen first game. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, obviously you're going to have Jake Majors at center. I think you'll have Carrick at one tackle and probably Christian Jones at the other. Junior Angelau is going to be a fixture. The other guard spot's my biggest question. Who'd be the returning veteran at guard?
Connor.
Well, he's not really a veteran, so
I mean, they're not super deep right now with regards to.
They don't have any upperclassmen guards that would be in that mix.
Here, I'll go to the scholarship board and read out all the names that you need to know. So, on the scholarship board, your seniors on the offensive line are Christian Jones and Junior Angelau. I think both of those guys start the opener.
I do too. Yeah.
You've got Hookfin.
No.
Hookfin's the only junior offensive lineman in the program. And then you've got sophomores, Carrick, Garth, Parr, Connor, and Majors.
I mean, I guess that other guard spot's my only big question. And I mean, DJ Campbell, if there's a freshman that's going to start, it'd be DJ Campbell. So, you know what, man, I guess maybe I will just go ahead and plug him in as my 5th starter. So I'm going Carrick, Campbell, Majors, Junior Angelau, and Christian Jones as your left tackle for game 1. I think by game 6 or 7, I think you might see another one of these freshmen in there, maybe a couple of them.
Onward, you disagree with that at all?
No, I was just thinking about it, and Carrick, because it's really, it's, at the right guard position, you've got, like you said, it's Connor and Isaiah Hookfin are kind of those guys that, you kind of look at as, possibilities. You're not going to make any change at center, this year or anything to that effect. And the other reason I would agree with Jason is when you do have a young freshman quarterback, you will like to try to give him some time. And so you want to hope that the veteran guys hold up where you got to have a margin of error if you put in a bunch of young guys. But to Jason's point, if we get to the Red River weekend and the season isn't going the way you would hope for, then all bets are off at that point.
I think Devon Campbell is the best offensive lineman in the program the day he shows up on campus. So that's one. That's the freshman for me. And I'm with you, Jason. Across the board, I think Jones and Carrick today are your offensive tackles. They get another spring. They're going to know the offense. And I would feel a lot different if Banks or NATO or one of the real high-profile guys, specifically those two, if those two guys were here in the spring, I think I'd feel different. I think it's a big ask that those guys will take their first practice on August 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that, and that 4 weeks later they're in the starting lineup over a senior in Christian Jones and what will be a sophomore in Carrick that will be in his 2nd full season in this offense under this coaching staff.
I think you can throw Cameron Williams into that mix too. We all know Kelvin Banks has tremendous unlimited upside, right? But Cam Williams doesn't have the ceiling Kelvin Banks does, but he may come in as college ready as a lot of these guys. He's so big. He moves really well. I mean, he's not going to get bullied around by college defensive linemen from the jump. Now, again, him not enrolling early, I don't expect him to be a big factor early on, but yeah, I wouldn't sleep on Cam Williams as being an early contributor.
What was I just looking at? Oh, you know what? A couple of questions, kind of off the beaten path. My guy Aaron Cunningham, I think on Facebook, has been asking this question multiple times. And look, given that Xavier Worthy came from Michigan last year, and it was in a way, boy, where would Texas have been without him? Any chance Texas flips Michigan kids with Harbaugh likely leaving for the Vikings job? Jason, I'm going to let you.
Yeah, I saw that comment this morning when I was first on, and I went and looked at Michigan's commitment list. There's not a single player on there that Texas really even recruited. So
Yeah.
I don't see any of that happening at all. Certainly not. They'd have to flip today. So could you have a Xavier Worthy thing where, a couple months from now they want to transfer? Maybe. But there's nobody on that list that's a legitimate Texas target as of today. So
yeah, that was unique because Worthy had been a guy that Sarkisian had recruited
at Alabama, right?
Yeah, and
he almost flipped to Alabama. People forget. I mean, there was a big time relationship there. So it's not like Texas just worked him when he got in the portal. I mean, he was committed to Michigan, but almost flipped to Alabama late in the process.
Keith 254 asking any info at all about these PWOs we're getting. Guys, let me just say, don't worry about PWOs too much. Texas will sign 15, 20 guys. And if Texas, a success would be one of those 20 turns into a guy, like a real guy. I mean, it's a little bit unicorn chasing with the PWOs. You hope
those guys are mostly for depth and to run your scout team. Honestly, that's what anything above that is a blessing. But I mean, you're almost just looking for a scout team guys. Those are tremendous high school players, but the odds of those guys contributing at Texas
did any of those PWOs get a scholarship last year? It was always like a huge thing in August where they do a surprise.
We're never going to see that again, Anwar.
Yeah,
because now if Sarkisian had done that in August, he either has to go back to that kid and say, "I'm taking your scholarship away," or now that's a portal spot. Imagine Sarkisian having portal spots left over, and he's like, well, we're not going to take a portal guy. We're going to elevate our walk-ons to non-walk-on status. That gets in the way of your 85. I guess it wouldn't get in the way of your ability to take the maximum amount of incoming players. But more times than not, I think it just comes down to what happens to those guys once you make them scholarship players. Because Jason, can you ever, Anwar, same question, anybody ever remember a guy getting moved to scholarship and then having that taken away?
No, but I think in today's day and age, you could do it, but you'd have to explain to them this is a year-by-year deal. I mean, technically, all scholarships are, but you'd have to be crystal clear. Hey, Joe Blow, you've been great. We're giving you a scholarship for this year. We're going to cover your tuition, room, and board. Nothing's guaranteed beyond that. Hopefully, it can be a 2, 3, 4-year deal, whatever the case may be. But this is a 1-year guaranteed, only 1-year deal.
What did Jet Bush, was he on last year?
Yes.
He's still
okay.
Yeah. He's still on.
Yeah. I can't think of one.
Yeah. I wonder, look, I'm asking, this is the kind of thing that maybe I should just know instead of asking. But, when a high school kid becomes a scholarship athlete, he can no longer go off the scholarship numbers because he's officially a scholarship athlete. I don't know how that works with walk-ons. That once you elevate to Jet Bush, he's now scholarship, material. I don't know if you're even able to do that. Like you can
kick him out of school.
He might still count against the 85 once you've officially allowed him to be counted towards the 85.
You just kick him out of school and have him pull a Ron McKelvey and enroll under a different name.
Yes. Yes. As Jason says, it may take a bit of a unique situation to hit that. Jason, let's reset. We're taking some questions. I'm seeing. Let me get out of our pinned messages and see if there's anything else in the messages here. Here's an interesting one. Hudson Card is starting against Bama. It's a bad sign for Card if Ewers starts against Bama. I mean, it's a bad sign for Hudson Card that Quinn Ewers is here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the president of the Hudson. All the things I've ever thought about Hudson Card, I still think are true, but I don't think it's going to happen at Texas. I'd be shocked if they did. I think Hudson Card's going to get his degree. He's in the McCombs Business School. I have no idea how long it will take him to get his degree, but that's really important. And then I think when that's over with, there's a good chance that Hudson Card will be a grad transfer in the portal. Anwar, we had that conversation earlier with Farrell that guys are doing everything they can to graduate in 3 so that they can have all the flexibility in the world in terms of transferring and taking their credits and not losing credits. I didn't say this. The reason why I brought up earlier, Jason, I don't think you were here, the kid, the Bryan kid that was from Georgia, that Texas was hoping to land in the portal, and he ends up not going to Texas. I heard that one of the hiccups that might have occurred there was academics and the ability to transfer over all of his credits, because he was a senior at Georgia, but not a grad transfer yet. And Texas will only take 60 hours of transferable credits. So for a guy like him who wasn't a grad transfer yet, this person didn't tell me he thought that this is what happened. This person just told me, I have experience in trying to deal with transfers at UT. And that guy's profile screamed something might have happened in terms of transferable credits. And I just wanted to mention that because something I'm going to write in the war room for this week was a little bit of conversation about the trickiness of if you've got 100 hours and you're really close to graduating at one school, Texas will not let anybody, this person told me it doesn't matter who it is, they will not take more than 60 transferable credits. And it would make Texas taking a 3rd or 4th year transfer potentially trickier than it might for another school, as Mike Farrell said, who might just take everything and not give a shit.
You'd be better off getting your last 20 hours at that other school than becoming a grad transfer and going, yeah.
It might be the only way for some guys if they wanted to transfer to Texas. Let's say Tommy Brockermeyer ends up being a senior at Alabama, and in his last year, he's like, I want to go back to Texas, by God, and finish my life. I'm just saying it might, even for a guy like Brockermeyer, it might be tricky making that move as an older player to Texas because of these rules inside the university regarding transferable hours. It's one of the things I wanted Anwar and I to dig around a little bit.
You know what? All this new portal shit, they may change that rule by the time Tommy Brockermeyer is a senior.
But apparently it's not an athletics rule. Apparently it's an actual university rule.
Athletics may flex their muscles a little bit and get that rule changed.
Hey, we're either going into the SEC or we're not, right? Like, you can't put us at a disadvantage versus every other school in the SEC. Anwar, who's your favorite player in this class?
In the 2022 class?
Yeah, of the guys that Texas has signed, non-Quinn Ewers.
So non-transfer portal guys, right?
Well, I'll let you go with this anywhere you want to. I'm just curious, who do you love?
Well, it's interesting because I know who Jason loves.
Yeah, we talking like their play or just like, hey, I like this dude as a guy. I like covering his recruitment.
I think as a talent. I mean, you can break that question down any way you want to. I'm just curious if there's a couple of crown jewels. I say that because look, go ahead, Anwar.
Well, the guy that I love that it's going to take some time, I think, to develop. So I'll put my caveat on that. The guy that I love is Ethan Burke. Like that's the guy that I just feel like is a future baller. I just love the footwork and everything I've read that Jason's written about him as far as being a lacrosse player, playing at a high level at Westlake, standing out in 2 championship games. Like that's probably for me. That's the guy that I think like I have such high hopes for at some point. So you say like, hey, you had to start a fan cup presidency, something so forth, then I'd probably start there.
By the way, that is a perfect, in the spirit of the question that I'm asking, that's a perfect answer.
Okay, perfect. So there you go. If you ask for one guy that I love, I'll start there.
You have early dibs on the Ethan Burke fan club presidency.
I think he's fantastic. I just think I'm imagining what his body looks like when he gets in the weight program like 2 years from now. Not expecting anything immediate, but if you're just like, who do you love? Yeah, that guy I love.
Same question, Jason. Who do you want dibs on? That I'll frame it like that. Who do you have dibs on with regards to fan club presidency?
Yeah, that's a great answer because you're buying the stock when it's low, right? It's only
as low
going
as
to
it's ever going to get, right?
Yeah. So good one to take. If I'm just going for value, I'm going Kelvin Banks or DJ Campbell. I mean, I think those guys are Sunday players. Terrence Brooks probably in that category. So I'm assuming we can't take DJ Campbell because he's not yet committed. So give me Kelvin Banks. I mean, we're going two ways to look at it. Anwar's going for growth potential, and he nailed it with that pick. But if I'm going best player, I'm going Kelvin Banks. My initial reaction is, huh?
What about Nair?
Oh, are we talking transfers too? Yeah.
Everybody's
I'm probably going Nair. Then I think Nair is going to be fantastic for Texas and just what they need opposite Xavier Worthy. Guy, when I said, oh, are we talking personality? Omar probably that was who he was alluding to. I love Malik Murphy. Everybody knows I'm a big Malik fan. I love Malik Ogbo too, man, the dude up from Washington. Malik Ogbo just has a smile that lights up a room. Just a great kid. He wants to be a broadcaster someday. And he's certainly got the personality for it. I tell you, who I really like too from a personality is Ethan Burke, Anwar, man. Every time I've reached out to him, he's been super busy, but he always gives me time. He's like interrupted his workout to give me an interview. I'm like, dude, we can talk later. No, I'm good. I'm here. The weights clanging around in the background. Give me an interview. The night before signing day, when I called him and I said, hey, introduce myself. Say, hey, man, I'm hearing you're going to maybe flip from Michigan to Texas. He was kind of flustered and caught off guard, which you understand. He goes, you know what? Yeah, not ready to talk. I'll call you back later. And I'm like, I'll never hear from this guy again. We'll see what happens. And sure enough, he called me back that night and he's like, okay, dude, it's official. I'm going to flip to Texas. I'm announcing tomorrow. Gave me commitment quotes and all this. So Ethan Burke,
you definitely love you some Ethan Burke.
I love Ethan Burke. I've only been covering him really for about a month and a half, but I do love me some Ethan Burke based on my initial interactions there. But I'm going Nair. I guess if we're going one player that I'm buying stock in, his stock's still pretty low too. We haven't seen anything from him in Austin. So, yeah, I'll go wide receiver transfer Isaiah Nair.
I'll go Campbell first because I think I can't say how – I think Devon Campbell is Justin Blaylock 20 – it's the guy that I thought for a long time. And then when he went to the All-American game, physically, he's not the guy that jumps out at you. Like if you see Campbell in a uniform – standing next to Kelvin Banks, there's no question which guy looks like the first guy you want off the bus versus something else and the fifth guy off the bus. But Campbell, you put that dude in football pads and, Adam Gorney called him the meanest, hungriest, nastiest SOB that he has seen in an offensive lineman. And I just think he can play multiple positions. I think he's going to be fantastic from the moment that he jumps on campus. But I think that's a bit of an easy one. So I'm looking at NATO would be another for me. I have him rated the 10th best player in the state. That's not significantly higher than Rivals. Rivals moved him up to number 12 in the state in their final rankings when it was all said and done. So, I think NATO's going to be a multi-year starter. I think Kelvin Banks is going to be a multi-year starter. I think, Devon Campbell, Devon Campbell's, whichever is it. I have too many friends whose names are Devon that I keep wanting to call him Devon, and it's Devon, right?
I've always said Devon, and he's never corrected me. So
it's one of those Stephans and Stevens. Like,
yeah.
You can get two different things out of it if you want to.
Hey, Champ Lewis, just as expected, committed to TCU. I mentioned earlier, technically a Texas commit, but Texas will be playing against him next year. He does go by DJ Campbell. So
probably because a bunch of us dudes can't get
butcher's name. Yeah,
Devon and Devon, right?
He's Devon Campbell Jr., but it's his uncle that's also Devon. It's kind of a weird deal there. His uncle's very involved in his life. Yeah. So Champ Lewis to TCU catch, that hurts our future cast percentage because we've got him as Texas.
We couldn't change it.
Nah, they need to fix that. That's stupid, man. So now
I complain about that all the time.
It goes down as a miss for us because we don't, unless we change it right before we change him in the database to a TCU.
Oh my God, don't do that. I got called out once for like basically putting in a future cast right as the guy was announcing.
Yeah. I mean, I can show it. He texted me this morning. Yeah, I'm going to TCU. I'm like, oh, good for you, man. But
I also would I think the sleeper I say sleeper. It's all relative. In terms of playing this season, I think Brennan Thompson has a chance over the course of 12 games to go from a guy that's maybe a bit role player early on. He's their slot guy of the future. So it will be interesting for me to see how much reps in games he takes away from a Jordan Whittington this year, if any. Like maybe Jordan Whittington holds it down, and Brennan Thompson is a 2023 guy more than a 2022 guy. I think Brennan Thompson in a Steve Sarkisian offense has a chance to be lightning in a bottle. And by the end of next year, he could be a guy that's playing a lot in 3 receiver like sets with Isaiah Nayer and Xavier Worthy. I'm really high on Thompson's speed. It is, along with Quinn Ewers' arm, Brennan Thompson's speed may be the most special physical quality / gift of all the guys that are signing. If this were baseball, he'd be like an 80 rating in speed. And that's not insignificant for an offense that wants to go vertical and wants to get guys down. It is the Orangebloods National Signing Day 2 show. Let's give a little bit of love to Rogue Apothecary, the sponsor of the show. You see their little graphic up there in the corner. Michael, if you are listening at this moment, because you could just as easily be going to the bathroom. Well, there it is. He's on it. Why would I ever doubt Michael Rockman? In addition to giving some love to Rogue Apothecary, thank you to Michael Rockman for bringing guests in and out and just generally being on top of it, as he always is. Rogue Apothecary, the sponsor of today's show. Use your promo code Orangebloods over at therogueshop.com for your CBD, your Delta 8, all your pleasures that you need. Anwar and I and Alex are all big fans. I think Ari may be jumping aboard. And I think even Jason, when it's all said and done, maybe getting on the Rogue train as well. Choo-choo when it's all said and done. Is this right? Carson Smith just said B.J. Foster to Sam Houston State?
Yeah, I just sent you guys that on Slack.
That's amazing. But yeah, it's official and amazing.
I don't know even how to respond to that.
I mean, I hate to call it a fall from grace, but he was a guy that was a top national recruit, and he's going to finish his career at Sam Houston State. That's I hope he does well there, but that can't be.
He's like a 30-game starter.
Yeah,
I guess that tells us that Texas needed to make an upgrade in the secondary this past year. I mean, that is, I would have thought B.J. Foster would find
you thought
nice landing
Mississippi State or, kind of a mid-level Power 5 team you thought would make a run at him, but maybe just want to stay closer to home or something. I don't know.
There's no reason to bash on the situation or anything else. Good luck to B.J. Foster. I mean, I'm not anybody that has any. I genuinely thought B.J. Foster and still think he's a guy that will go to an NFL training camp, and we'll see. Guys make teams all the time that are drafted late or unrestricted free agents. You got to be able to play special teams and everything else. Going to Sam Houston State, that's just an eye opener for me. I almost think I would have just gone to the NFL before I would go to Sam Houston State after a 4-year career at Texas. it puts him in a pretty noteworthy situation. I've never seen anything quite like that before. A multi-year starter at the University of Texas enters the portal, ends up at Sam Houston State. That's surprising. And again, good luck to BJ. Hope he still makes it to the NFL, but that's some stuff. Here's an interesting question, Jason. What do you guys think about Travell Johnson, the only linebacker commit in this class? Does that open the door for Perkins today, possibly? I don't think it's interesting, Jason, because of the Perkins part.
You're not going to say who it's from? You're not going to say who that question is from?
Who is it from?
Money out the anus.
Oh, God. Thank you, Money out the anus, for such a quality question. I think some conversation about the linebacker recruiting is probably not something we should completely ignore.
First off, Travell, they've talked to him about playing kind of a hybrid safety role, the way his former teammate Maurice Blackwell is doing at Texas. So I don't think it really impacts, and I don't think Harold Perkins is really worried about what Travell Johnson is doing or not. I don't think that impacts Harold Perkins one bit, but thank you for Money out to anus for
it's a lyric from Can't Nobody Hold Me Down with Mason Puffy. So it's I won't get into it, but those are two names I
actually know. That's old school rap, but what? I would never picked it for my screen name, but hey, good for him.
It'd be funny if Anwar, that guy comes back and just says, "No, man, I make money out the anus."
Good for him. Well, yeah, he's in the chat and involved, so good for him.
What were you saying? I've completely lost.
I've wrapped it up. I just said I don't think that that opens the door for Harold Perkins at all. I don't think
not a great linebacker class though, and it makes
do it in the portal too, and they're missing there too. So I mean, I don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I'm convinced the starting inside linebacker next to Marvion Overshown is somebody that's not on the team yet. I just don't know who that's going to be, but they've tried to upgrade that middle linebacker spot, that inside linebacker spot, 2 consecutive off seasons. I mean, a year ago, they tried to get the kid from USC that ends up transferring to Ohio State and then doesn't play because of the NCAA weirdly made him ineligible. I can't even remember what it was that kept that guy from being able to play. And then we know that they've gone after guys in the portal this year, whether it was the kid from UNLV that ends up Jacoby Windman goes to Michigan State. They went after the kid from Central Michigan pretty briefly, and I think he went to South Carolina or somewhere in the SEC. That's a position they want to upgrade, and I still think there will be a linebacker addition at some point. But Jeff Choate comes over from a small school without a big rep as a recruiter because he's a coach at a smaller school, and he did not distinguish himself in year one as a recruiter. I always talk about Anwar, guys are either recruiters or they're coaches. Jeff Choate at this point would appear to be a guy who's a coach first and a recruiter second. I think that makes what he does this season with that position really critical because you got to be able to recruit some.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, yes, you and the thing is, the presence of Gary Patterson, to me, Ketch, puts everybody on notice on the defensive side of the ball that there's going to be an expectation that things are going to get better in every particular area, and recruiting will be a part of it, and we haven't really seen them hit on recruiting in the transfer portal yet, Ketch, and we hadn't necessarily seen them hit on recruiting from a linebacker perspective in from the high school ranks. You got to be good at one of them, right? I mean, you got to, if you're not good, at least in the high school ranks, kill it in the portal or vice versa. But they lost out a lot of battles in the portal. Catch, Jason all covered, a lot of those close battles, but they don't win. They don't seal the deal. And, missing out on a lot of the guys in state. So yeah, this will be a big year, I think, for Choate and what needs to be done. And look, Andre Coleman lost his job after one season.
I was just about to say that.
So I mean, Coleman lost his job after 1 year, and you could say he was a Herman guy and a holdover and so on and so forth. But we've already seen that. Look, if you're not killing it in recruiting, then that becomes a problem.
Well, and your players on the field better be tearing it up. And that was what we said about Coleman is, well, his receivers, they didn't develop from the stuff that they inherited like you would have liked to have seen in that position. And the recruiting wasn't great. The recruiting wasn't great for Choate in this recruiting class. And I don't think we would look at the linebackers last year and say that they were a plus part of the team. I think Geoff Choate is an excellent football coach. I mean, you're talking about a guy that was a head football coach and a successful one. So, like, he can coach at this level and with the expectations that exist. I think he will be a guy on the staff this year where something has to pick up. And I think that's something more than anything else. They're not relying on Geoff Choate to make it rain in recruiting, but they need that linebacker core to be.
He better get Anthony Hill from Denton Ryan. Someone asked earlier about the linebackers for 2023. It's not a deep class in the state, but Anthony Hill is a 5-star player. He's one of the – he might be – I have to pull up his profile. I've got to figure he's probably the top linebacker prospect in the country. He's been on the Texas campus a million times. He wasn't here for the junior day a couple weeks ago, but he's almost a can't miss prospect at this point. You're not getting Harold Perkins. You can't be letting these 5-star types slip away. They've got to get Anthony Hill. They've got to land Anthony Hill. If they don't, that's really bad news for Texas and Geoff Choate.
Anthony Hill, the number 1 ranked inside linebacker prospect in the 2023 class, and
number 12th ranked overall. So I got to figure. I have to look. I think he's probably the top ranked linebacker. Period. As I look at this, yeah, he is. He's the top ranked linebacker in the country, number 12 player overall. So, he's been at every Texas recruiting event they've had. He didn't come to the junior day a couple weeks ago because he already had made plans to take other visits that weekend. But this is a guy that he and his family both like Texas quite a bit, so they've got to find a way to close the deal with Anthony Hill.
He's kind of the Devon Campbell of the 2023
little bit. I think he's
class.
a little more open than Campbell, maybe.
But I mean, I think he's a guy that you look at as number 1 in the country at his position. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about a need, where he plays, if he were already a senior, I think we'd be talking about him as that guy sliding into Overshown at that inside linebacker position. I mean, I think if he were a college player right now and Texas could land him, you might be talking about him as the type of potential day 1 starter that we are with Campbell. But again, like you just outlined, Jason, his recruitment, not exactly like Campbell's, more wide open. It feels like he's a true national prospect, whereas, I don't know. I mean, in the end, it's going to be between Texas and Oklahoma for Campbell. That's about as regionally focused as any recruitment in the 2022 class turned out to be when it was all.
It's rare that you have that where a guy narrows it down to 2, and he did it pretty early too. It's been those 2 for almost 2 months now. Anthony Hill, David Hicks, DJ Hicks, those the 5-star linemen out of Allen. Those 2 are kind of similar in that, either one of those guys probably walks in day 1 for Texas as a no-brainer starter. So, we'll see. They've got their work cut out for both of them, but we'll see.
Anwar, I've got something for you. I have our first National Signing Day conspiracy, and I've been saving it for 2 hours.
Okay.
So when you were originally looking at the Rivals rank, I think it was in a question with Adam. We were talking about guys ranked in the top 10, guys ranked in the top 20, and you made the mention of. Sorry, I'm sitting here. I'm trying to pull up the top that top 100 so that I can look.
You talk about the Rivals top, like within the state.
Yeah. So the conspiracy that exists there, and I'm pulling it up right now, is that, I outlined that in my rankings in the top 10, it was 4 for A&M, 4 for Texas if you include Devon Campbell, and then you had 1 for Clemson, and then wherever Harold Perkins goes is that other slot. And then I mentioned that inside the top 25, that was the kind of the arbitrary number that I selected. It was 7 for A&M and Texas, and then nobody else had more than 2. The Rivals rankings are slightly different. If we look at the top 10, A&M's got 5, and Texas only has 2, not including Devon Campbell. But they've got number 11 and 12. So, it's one of those, if you count
10,
just
11,
the top
and 12.
10, if you go 12, it ends up being 5 and 5, which is essentially the thing that I pointed out. But what's really interesting, and here's my conspiracy theory for you. You extended it out to 20, at which point, I forgot, A&M's got 9 in the top 25. I think they've got 8 in the top 20. And Texas had a smaller number. But if Texas on the Rivals list has a kid at 21, 22, and 24. So if 10 and 20 are big shining numbers, it's interesting to me that Texas had the 11 and so they had the first 2 spots outside of the top 10, and then they had 3 of the 4 top spots outside the top 20, which from an accounting standpoint, when you brought up the numbers of what A&M had done, it didn't make it seem way more lopsided. But if you drag it out a little bit, like 2 spots either way, suddenly it evens up. I'm surprised a Texas fan hasn't, because A&M fans would do this to me all the time. They would draw a line in the sand. For instance, they would say, Ketch has 5 kids ranked in the top 25. I'm just an arbitrary makeup number outside the 25. But then they would say, but he's got a guy ranked 26th, 28th, 35th. They would convince themselves that I did that to make the numbers look funny. So because it's been alleged over the years that I cooked the books in favor of Texas, I thought it was funny that if you look at the Rivals rankings, 2 guys had to, like in the top 10, Kelvin Banks finishes 11 and NATO finishes 12. I have both of those 2 guys inside the top 10. For Rivals, they're the first 2 guys outside the top 10. And then if you look at the top 20, Brennan Thompson, Jalen Gilbo, and Jere Bledsoe, all guys that I have Thompson and Bledsoe inside the top 20. Rivals has them barely outside the top 20. If you're looking for a conspiracy theory for Rivals against Texas, that's what it would be.
That's pretty deep. You think the Rivals guys are actually sitting here thinking, no, we got to keep them just outside of that top 10.
I think there's only a lunatic out there like myself. And I only noticed it because when Anwar was reading numbers out to Gorney earlier, he was reading them from the Rivals list. And I have it 4-4 between Texas and Texas A&M, but that's including Campbell. But when Anwar read the numbers out and didn't include Campbell, it was 5 inside the top 10 for A&M and 2 for Texas. And I was like, God, how big of a homer am I where I've got it distributed evenly and Rivals has it pretty lopsided? It's the Banks and NATO recruitments. I have both of those guys just a couple of spots higher, whereas they've got Chris Marshall ranked 8th. I think I've got him ranked 12th. And someone else. Oh, they've got Julian Humphrey ranked 4th. And I think I might have him 11th, just outside the top 10. All those guys, national top 50-ish players. Do we go back to the Kelvin Banks conversation from earlier, Anwar? I still think, if you guys missed it, we had Adam Gorney on earlier today here on the Orangebloods National Signing Day 2 show. By the way, give us a subscription. There's like over 700 people watching right now on Facebook and YouTube. If you're on YouTube, do us a solid and help us get to 11,000 subscribers today. It would be pretty cool if we could do that. We're like 100 plus away. Contribute to that. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and help us get to 11,000 today. Anwar, I thought it was really fascinating to hear the recruiting rankings conversation, and for Adam Gorney to tell us, well, Kelvin Banks fell to 65. He didn't want to describe it as he plummeted from 10 to 65, but he also said when we had our rankings discussions, there were multiple people within the Rivals rankings discussion that wanted to drop him seemingly significantly lower than 65.
Whoa.
Yeah, seriously. And only because we had to get rid of Jason, only because we had to get rid of Gorney, did we probably not ask more questions related to how that happened.
Did you ask him and I saw this in the chat too, how did Justice Finkley drop if they're putting so much weight in the,
We didn't get to Finkley.
Yeah, they're putting so much weight in those practices. Finkley should have shot up the rankings, but he dropped. Listen, Gorney's my dude. I love Adam Gorney. Like, he's one of my favorite guys in the Rivals Network, but I don't agree with those rankings. No.
Yeah, and look, I still have Kelvin Banks rated as a 5-star prospect. I have some questions about whether he plays tackle or not. Jason, can you ever remember in the history of Texas? Apologies for making you dial up the archives in your brain, on something we haven't probably thought about. I am just having a hard time thinking of a Texas kid that's ever dropped like that. Based on the guys workouts.
Yeah, no, me either. And more likely or more common, you have guys that are maybe 130th that drop to 200. Okay. But usually those top 10, top 15, even top 20 guys are pretty much locked into that range. I mean, they may drop 10 spots, but you don't see those dramatic swings like we see with Kelvin Banks. Again, based off the bowl workouts. And I get it. Hey, I'm not saying those shouldn't count at all. He should have dropped. I mean, I would have dropped him too, based on what I saw at those practices. But, also you got to also take into account the senior film and other things. I just think that was a bit extreme. But no, those guys that were, he was what, top 10 before that, right? Wasn't he right around top 10?
Yeah. He was the number 10 player in the country.
10.
Yes.
He was 10. Okay. Yeah. Those guys usually, if they're going to drop, it's maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 spots. You don't usually see a 50-something spot drop for guys that are ranked that highly.
That would have, I'm almost, because in the end, Campbell ends up being ranked, is he 13th?
14, I believe. He's 14, and because I looked at that, he's 14, yeah.
But he's 14 and the highest rated offensive lineman in the country in the Rivals rankings. That I'm guessing, without having it in front of me, that when Banks was at 10, that was the highest rated offensive line in the country. It's just clearly they didn't like what they saw in the practices in Orlando. I'm just surprised that there wasn't, I don't know, didn't sound like there was just a ton of reservations about it. It sounds like the way he described it. Anwar, am I describing it wrong to say that it was a consensus inside the Rivals rankings discussions that Banks, he made a point to say that Banks had guys that thought he should be even lower, and he never once said that there was anybody who stood on the table and said that Banks should stay at 5 stars.
No, he didn't. I mean, they basically made it. It came across as it could have been worse. Like that was the tone. Like, hey, like we could have ranked him way lower if we wanted to, and we did him a solid by only dropping him to there. Like I said, my challenge, my issue with it is you're telling me all your initial evaluation tape, everything else had him at a 5-star, convinced yourself he was a 5-star, put that 5-star label on him, and then, the guy doesn't excel at a new position, and then all of a sudden he gets dropped dramatically. Like, at that point, I just, you question just the evaluation process because they're wrong. They have to admit wrong. So either they were wrong on their initial evaluation, or they're, well, I guess technically that's what they have to admit, that they're wrong on their initial evaluation.
Big time.
But they're saying we got it so wrong initially, so bad that we handed out the most coveted gift, which was a 5-star, that we've got to somehow seemingly overcorrect. I don't know. To not give the guy any grace for switching position, then not give him any credit for saying, hey, I'll do it when no one else will do it. And then to judge it and have basically a week of practice somehow all of a sudden just negate everything that you said he was beforehand. I don't know. I don't see it. I want to be respectful, but I in some ways I got to call bullshit.
Anwar, I'm going to go one better for you, okay? Not only did they have him ranked highly and they went against what they had seen, initially they had Kelvin Banks ranked very lowly. He didn't creep into the top 100 until September of last year. He was 65. And then in basically, I think it must have been like August this year, roughly, he went to number 11 in the country. So you moved him to 11 in the country based on what he did at camps and things last spring and over the summer. Then you move him to top 10 in the top 10ish in the country, 11. He dominates. In December, they moved him up to 10. So everything they saw all fall was he's still a 5-star. In fact,
person scouting, like they.
Yeah,
Sam Spiegelman went to
see him play in person. They all fall. They watched him play and said, we're going to move him up actually a spot or two, and he's going to be 10th in the country. After 3 months of a season or whatever they watched, including preseason practices, then for 1 week they watched him down there playing a new position, and they dropped him 54 spots. Now, Sam, our Texas analyst, wasn't there. He was at the San Antonio All-American game. He wasn't at the Under Armour game. So maybe Sam wasn't able to kind of throw his weight around as much.
Sam saw him in person this year.
Oh, yes. But I'm saying when they said, hey, when the other analyst said, hey, we saw him in Orlando and he really struggled, we want to drop him 100 spots or whatever they were discussing. Sam wasn't in Orlando where he could say, nah, man, you guys are full of shit. I've seen him. I've watched this guy for a year now. It is just a curious drop. And I don't have a problem with him dropping. Okay. I mean, he did struggle. And I've said this, I haven't blasted all over Orangebloods, but like I go to those things on where I've got my phone and I'm taking video of these guys doing one-on-one reps because I want to tweet it out and say, oh, here's Texas target DJ Campbell. Good rep. Here's Justice Finkley. Great rep. I kept taking Kelvin Banks ones. I was like, uh-oh, trash. Uh-oh, trash. I never tweeted him out. He did struggle pretty mightily in the one-on-one portion of those practices. He played better in the games. So I get it. He dropped, but you can't totally ignore all the evidence you had before that made you move. It wasn't like they had him top 10 for since day one. He just stayed at top 10, stayed at top 10. And then these guys finally got to look at him and dropped him. No, man, they saw him in person, moved him way up, and then saw him in person again and moved him way back down. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, a drop is one thing, but a 50, whatever it was, 54 spot drop for a guy that you've had as a 5-star seems a little extreme to me. So.
Well, and onward, like to the point that you were making that I don't think can be stressed enough. Who likes to admit that they're way wrong? Like nobody else, no other recruiting industry service that I'm aware of dropped Banks.
They elevated him,
which is silly in itself.
That is silly.
That's as bad as it is to drop him, unless you hadn't changed your rankings since before his senior season, and you're like, oh, we hadn't seen him before. I mean, you don't elevate him after his struggles in Orlando.
You don't have to punish him, but it would seem weird to elevate. But rivals went out of their way to wave a flag and say, we screwed up big time. And man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for how that happened, because
this will be an interesting discussion for 3 years, because all these people who bitch about Rivals rankings, and we only hear them bitch about the ones when Rivals has them rated lower. There are a lot of occasions where Rivals has Texas commits rated higher than other media outlets, and Nobody acknowledges them. They don't even talk
Ever.
about it. But this will be an interesting one 3 years from now. You know, if Banks is not a starter, a plus starter, you know, Adam Gorney and the crew can be like, hey, told you so. If he is, there's going to be a lot of crow to be eaten, and I'm not going to be able to defend the Rivals guys. So
I think, you know what I think happened, Jason? I think Eric Davis, by the way, great name because it makes me think of the baseball player. I think this is the point right here, and I actually identify with this. A lot of times when I'm personally doing my rankings, I'll debut a guy too high because I'm overreacting to the newness of I've just seen him and I love him a lot, and I'll rank him higher, and then over the course of the year, he will slide back down, or not back down, but just slide down below that original ranking. And consequently, a lot of times, if I've seen something that makes me drop a guy, a lot of times it's too much, and they may have corrected themselves properly, but they may have also overcorrected themselves. And in a world where this thing gets extended out, let's say 4 more months, and there was a season or another something where you get another look at him, they may have eventually decided back up closer to maybe the top of the high 4-star pile, as opposed to, you know, it's not an accident now. He is among the last 2 or 3 guys that received a high 4-star ranking. And Anwar, you mentioned they didn't show him any grace. It sounded like Adam Gorney was telling us, we did actually, because if we hadn't showed him grace, maybe he falls out of the top 100 completely.
Oh my God, that's just insane. I would have.
And I think, to Eric's credit, we're looking at a case of a massive overcorrection in the name of correcting. And, you know, it will. In 3 years from now, it will be interesting to follow back up on.
But he played okay in the game, correct, Jason? Right? I mean,
Yeah, he was solid in the game. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, onward to the game thing, I thought he was really good in the run game. He had one bad pass protection rep where he got beat. I think the guy might have even jumped a little offsides, like nothing to hold against the guy. But as I watched him end the game back, just specifically him, there weren't a lot of one-on-one opportunities. And that game the game is such trash.
It really is. Yeah.
The one-on-ones take the most value of anything that happens during the course of the week. I didn't think there was anything in the game that made me change my opinion of what he had done early in the week. Always going to be real good. His strength as a player is that he mashes the hell out of people. And when he's put on the move in the run game, he's a devastating force. I've never looked at Kelvin Banks and said, oh, that's a Tommy Brockermeyer clone. Put him out. They have completely different strengths as players. And I thought in the game, Banks showed us his strengths perfectly fine. I didn't think we got to look at the question marks that would have popped up from the early in the week. I didn't think there was a lot of stuff that happened in the game that either validated that or spoke to it being wrong. I just thought that it just didn't quite happen that way in the game.
I mean, the thing is, to me, I know, Ketch, you talked about, you know, the overcorrection, and sometimes you feel like you rank a guy too high. But at the end of the day, if you hand out a 5-star or you put someone in your top 5, you can't therefore drop them that dramatically. Like at some point, the 5-star is the golden ticket, and that you maybe in the middle areas, it may be like a little bit hard to judge. When you anoint someone as saying you are one of the best in the land,
the best,
you better be right on that.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you guys on that. And again, I feel like I've tried to articulate what Rivals would have been thinking. I didn't really need to do that today. I mean, Adam just flat out told us, while I can appreciate, because Jason said it, he was taking game reps of Kelvin and deleting them from his phone because
Practice
they weren't good enough.
Yeah. I didn't want to like, you don't want to, let's say embarrass the kid, but I don't want to put out reps when he's getting beat. But he did get beat on more than he won, and he got beat pretty badly. I mean, I try to be as objective as I can. And Justice Finkley, that's what I don't understand, because Justice Finkley also dropped in the reps. Finkley beat him on a speed move. He beat him on a kind of speed to power where he basically put Banks on his backside almost. And okay, you want to drop him because he didn't fare well? Great, but how do you justify Justice Finkley dropping too? So,
if those reps are going to be so important in your evaluation, 100% agree. Real quick, because I want to wrap the Banks conversation piece up with this. And a guy says to give rivals the benefit of the doubt ain't happening to me. I don't think you have to. What I've done with my work over the course of the last decade, you have definitive mathematical values that you're able to place on a kid. Not every 5-star is going to hit, not even close. We will look back at every top 25 list of the last decade, and you'll see that number usually somewhere between 55 and 70%. So 30% of 5-stars aren't going to make it. It's when and when you look at the fact that Texas has a couple, if you include Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell as offensive linemen, statistically you're going to be on the right side of a coin flip if you get both of those guys to hit. I mean, the math would say that you won't hit both as high-level future NFL drafted players. That's where the development comes into play. I think that, for me, Banks is a guy that he kept describing Banks as a future second-round pick, and that's fine. But to me, if you're an offensive lineman and you think he's going to be a second-round pick in the NFL draft, he's a 5-star. Justin Blaylock was a second-round pick. And Justin Blaylock was an All-American and a 3-year starter and the best offensive lineman we've seen at Texas in 20 years. He was a 5-star all the way. I think they missed the boat a little bit on that. Real quick, guys, before we wrap things up, and there's no reason for us to go much longer, I want to thank everybody for watching. I wanted to cover some territory, and then we can get into some parting shots and final statements from all of us. So we were having the conversation about the portal earlier, Jason, and I mentioned that I had gone back and looked at the Rivals top 50 to just kind of see how guys turned out. When I did the top 50, 62%, so 31 out of 50, 62% were starters for the teams that they joined and or significant contributors. So, guys that weren't just starters, but guys that contributed heavily. I counted 6 out of the 50, so 12% had injuries that basically took them off the table. So what it ended up being was that you had 31 guys turn into starters, so 62%. There were 13 guys who I just described as busts because they either didn't play, they didn't start, whatever, which was 26%. And the same number of busts equated to the same number of guys that I called significant difference makers. Guys that 1 out of every 4 guys that was in the top 50 in the portal last year ended up being basically an All-American. And just in case anybody wants to know who some of the guys were that would qualify for significant difference makers, like I didn't count a guy like Henry Tua as like that guy just fell into the significant contributor, but not like the All-American. Ironically, Eric Gray was the number 1 ranked portal player last year, and he was the biggest bust in the portal. The biggest bust ended up being the guy that everybody thought would be the biggest star going from Tennessee to Oklahoma. But the guys that really jumped out, Charleston Rambo, I mentioned earlier, Jamison Williams, the kid that went to Michigan State, the running back that was in the Heisman conversation, Kenneth Walker was a guy that was in the, an All-American level player. And then, you can go to the top 10. Most of those guys hit, whether you're talking about Tyreek Stevenson started for that Georgia team. He was the number 3 guy in the portal last year. He was an all-ACC player and one of the best players on that Georgia defense. Jermaine Johnson went from Florida State from Georgia, 12 sacks, almost 20 tackles for loss. He was, I think, ACC Defensive Player of the Year. And who was another one that really jumped out to me? And then Darian Kendrick started all season for the Georgia at cornerback and went from Clemson to Georgia. There were some – I think this year there are going to be more big-time names. Like I said, 60% – because here's where it's interesting. 60% of the top 50, Jason, end up being starters or significant contributors. That level of hit rate is 5-star level. I mean, 60 to 70% of 5-stars will hit and end up being way more significant contributors than the majority of the guys that we're talking about. But to hit at 60% through the portal in a top 50 that, you know who was number 50 last year in the portal rankings for the Athletic? Byron Vaughn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all thought, And in the end, he ends up being a guy that counts in that 60% number because he goes to Utah State and actually had a really good year in year 1. So just some data. I realize that's a lot of numbers and stuff, and maybe it doesn't completely translate without graphics to just spit it out there. But the portal success last year was a lot higher than I think a lot of people would have thought. The significant first-team all-conference, first-team all-America kind of players actually equaled the busts. There was 12 significant difference makers versus 13 outright busts. But something to keep an eye on as we go into this next cycle. Does that type of number hold? Because if it does, the emphasis on the portal, I think, has to be more significant if it turns out you're definitively getting immediate returning starters at that high of a level. Anyway, that's my total thought. I don't know if there's anything else to say. Just that's my. I'm the president of the fan club of the portal. Any final thoughts, Jason? We'll come to you first. Final thoughts on signing day. We wait 5 more hours for DJ Campbell to make his decision. It's been not without news today, but we've done a good job in filling 3 hours.
Yeah, a lot of filler. No real final thoughts. Like I said, we've got a couple stories written and ready if Campbell picks Texas as we expect. I'm trying to get prepared. We got this freeze coming in tonight. I got to somehow make a grocery run today to stock up for a couple days. We don't have shit in our house to feed our kids. So, not the most uneventful signing day in a National Signing Day too, but that's kind of what we've come to expect. But again, it's not going to be a big day in numbers, but if Texas gets DJ Campbell, that equals probably, 3 or 4 commitments, what I'd consider 3 or 4 normal commitments. This is would be the highest rated offensive line commitment Texas has ever landed in the 20-year history of Rivals.com rankings. So it's not a lot of news in terms of quantity, but it's a big piece of news potentially in terms of quality.
Anwar, what about you?
Do I need to buy a shovel? I'm
hoping I don't have to leave my house for a day or two.
Is this supposed to be that bad?
They said Round Rock's already canceled school for Thursday and Friday. So, I would say get your provisions and stock up on some canned goods or something. It's not going to be very long lived. You're like last year was whatever, a week, 2 weeks, whatever. This is going to be a couple days. So
the power grid holds up.
Yeah. I don't want to be that person out at HEB stocking up on canned goods. I don't know. There's just something about that. I'm just like, I don't know who you are. That's sort of, last few times I went to HEB, people have stocked up on stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want to. Something about that's just weird.
Hey, Jason, one more note from Money Out to Anus.
I just saw that. Yeah.
Good luck at the store, Jason.
My dad texted me earlier. I don't know if you saw me text. He's like, "Man, the lines at HEB are the longest he's ever seen." So I'm like, "Oh shit!"
Oh my God!
Yeah, but they said
Go to
Walmart's not
Randall's,
too bad.
apparently.
So I'm gonna make a quick. I got a Walmart like 2 miles from my house. I'm gonna try to dart through there real quickly.
It's PSD from last year.
I think so. Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah, probably.
It's
All right.
by the way, it's young, black, and famous money out the anus. No, so I'll figure it out. First of all, just want to say thank you guys for watching, thank you guys for supporting, thank you guys for doing it. Please do me a couple favors: like, subscribe, share it with some folks. We'll be back, later today. I know this is some of Ketch's stuff, but I hope you guys appreciate the content that we're putting out there. I stand with you guys as far as the Banks things is concerned. And if you like the content and you like people who are not going to say what needs to be said or what should be said just for fear of repercussions, and you want people who keep it real with you and keep it a buck, this is your channel. If you want a person who has a home phone in their house, like Jason Suchomel does,
and it always rings. It always rings when we're recording.
Jason's using that landline to dial 976 numbers and 1-900 numbers. He's doing it so his wife doesn't know. Anyway, I appreciate you guys' support as always.
I'll let you paid the bills, Anwar. I'll let that kind of speak for itself. I just want to say this because it's the first time I've seen this. And it's a hell of a thing to just end with. Pete Thamel reported earlier, Florida State is expected to name a guy named Derek Ray as he is a guy that was at Oregon State's director of player personnel. The title he's officially being given, general manager. And it's the thing that when Patterson was getting ready to be hired, I kept saying, we're a year or two away from every program in the country having a general manager and a head coach. And all the power in college football currently is head coach to general manager, right? There aren't even general managers at most places. So head coaches have all the power, whereas in college football or in pro football, the general manager ranks above the head coach. It will be interesting to see in this brave new world of college football where they go to, because general manager is exactly where I thought Gary Patterson, that's the exact title that I thought that they should give him, with a role pretty similarly. I wonder how we won't make it till the end of the decade before the general manager of college football programs are as well known, I think, as the general managers of pro football programs are going to be. It's the wave of the future. And Florida State today officially giving a guy that title. I'd love to be at Florida State's National Signing Day press conference just to ask questions about what the power. Does that mean he is officially higher than everybody but the head coach if you're the general manager? I just, one of these hierarchy things, because they've never existed before. And I think we always think of the coordinators historically as the number twos in the program. And it might be that those guys are now number threes and the number twos will be general managers or direct, whatever that highest ranking title is. Just interesting stuff going on in college football beyond, obviously, announcements from DJ Campbell. If you missed it, we all think Campbell's going to Texas. It would be a surprise if he doesn't. But if you just tuned in and are like, what did you guys say about Campbell? Nothing yet there that you need to freak out or like even really like he's announcing at 4. Then there's really nothing before that. But look, for myself, Anwar Richardson, Jason Suchomel, Adam Gorney, Mike Farrell, they all joined us earlier. If you missed anything, just go to our YouTube channel, click on the video, all 3+ hours archived. You can watch as much or as little of it as you want to. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll do it again. Well, tomorrow's the modcast. So we'll literally be going live again tomorrow. But it's been a lot of fun. Until next time, later.